My younger sister is the strongest warrior, protecting humanity, while her older brother is a ghoul, belonging to the undead. Despite being blood relatives, due to an accident, they stand on opposing sides. Anzi was once human, also dreaming of becoming the strongest warrior. However, during a battle against monsters, he was betrayed by his comrades. His supposed best friend, believing him weak, hesitated not a moment before pushing him into the abyss, ultimately leading to his death. Yet, no one expected him to revive. Only, upon awakening, Anzi discovered he had transformed into a grotesque skeleton. Reborn as a skeleton, he was lost in confusion. Putting aside the betrayal, he was no longer human. His warrior dream had become a cruel joke. However, after a period of despair, he finally escaped his sorrow. Because he realized monsters could level up their power. Could a skeletal monster level up enough to become human again? So, he immediately set to work, embarking on a journey of slaying monsters to level up, and that he could use his superior intelligence for strategic level-up hunts. His second target, a ferocious netherwolf. This monster was powerful, capable of killing him with a single blow. However, netherwolves harbored intense hatred for warriors. Upon sensing a warrior in distress, they would invariably come to investigate. Exploiting this, he used his human intellect, setting a trap by the abyss, waiting for the netherwolf to fall prey. The plan succeeded. The injured netherwolf plunged into the abyss, becoming a corpse. Anzi's level rose from 3 to 5. After slaying the netherwolf, his body began to change, evolving from a skeletal monster into a stronger stone golem. Through his reflection in the water, Anzi saw his current appearance. While still frightening, compared to his skeletal form, he was closer to human. The evolution not only altered his appearance but also enhanced his attributes, and granted him the stone golem's special skill, Devour. By consuming corpses, he could rapidly level up. It was like having a cheat code. With Devour, his leveling speed would surely accelerate. However, as he prepared to devour a rat monster, he hesitated. He was once a living human, now forced to consume disgusting monster remains. But for greater power, he finally resolved to bite down, devouring the rat monster piece by piece. As his level increased, the wounds on his abdomen healed at a visible rate. In the following days, he repeated the cycle of killing and consuming monsters. Gradually, he found himself becoming increasingly strange, relishing the taste of monster corpses, enjoying this life, becoming more like a monster. A human soul residing within a monstrous body, repeatedly surpassing his limits warped his inner self. Now, he could only hope for the next evolution, hoping to become more human. Otherwise, if he encountered his sister in this form, he might be mistaken for a minor monster and eliminated. After all, even as a human, his sister disliked him, let alone now as a monster. His sister possessed exceptional talent, regarded as a genius, while he was merely a complete waste. Even his sister had told him, a waste like him becoming a warrior was no different from seeking death. Yet, becoming a warrior was Anzi's sole lifelong dream. He was a useless older brother, while his sister was gifted. His sister was arrogant, and Anzi could only endure it all in silence. As he wallowed in painful memories, lamenting his unfair fate, he suddenly heard a familiar voice, emanating from a nearby passage. 3 warriors appeared, one of whom was his sister. Fortunately, she didn't recognize him, but was scolding a young man. From their conversation, Anzi learned this young man was in charge of the team's logistics, but upon entering the depths of the underground city, they discovered they hadn't brought enough medicine. In a dangerous dungeon, untreated injuries could be fatal. Finding the tone too harsh, another pink-haired girl in the team intervened, suggesting they retreat if their medicine was insufficient. However, his sister turned and scolded her. As they argued about the medicine, Anzi inadvertently made a noise. Although faint, it was caught by his sharp-eared sister. She immediately summoned magic, firing an ice arrow. Anzi couldn't dodge in time, his arm injured by the arrow. This is bad, I'm doomed, they definitely won't let me go. The young man who protected humanity with his life had become the ancient king of the undead, not only standing against humanity, but nearly killed by his own sister. The second day after his rebirth, he coincidentally encountered his sister. She was now a level 18 mage, supported by a level 14 warrior and a level 15 priest. Facing this lineup, the outcome for Anzi, a level 13 executioner devil, was without doubt. After enduring several attacks, he was severely wounded. As the level 14 warrior prepared to finish him, Anzi seized the moment, elbowing him unconscious. Then he quickly fled deeper into the dungeon. However, just as he thought he had escaped death, his dear sister acted. A level 18 mage only needed a short time to form a magic circle. to launch an attack. Before Anzi could react, an ice arrow pierced his calf. After this blow, he couldn't stand. Unless given enough time to heal, which was clearly impossible. Now, his sister stood before him, preparing her final blow. She directly summoned a magic circle, preparing high-level magic to kill him. As he faced imminent death, the experiences of past years flashed through his mind. He felt immense unwillingness. He had always had poor talent, but still strived to be a warrior. He thought he could protect humanity with his own strength, but was betrayed by his comrades. Reborn as a monster, even as a monster, he never abandoned his ultimate goal of purifying himself back into a human form, to continue protecting humanity. Yet now, he faced death at the hands of his own sister. This made him question the meaning of his rebirth. At this moment, the fatal blow was about to land. Anzi shouted his sister's name. In that instant she froze, the attack deviating from its original trajectory, landing beside him. It seemed she still held some affection for her useless older brother. While she was gathering magical energy, Anzi used magic to heal his wounds. Her missed attack gave him a chance to escape. He pretended to charge fiercely towards her, slipping past her while she was distracted. But she didn't realize. Her past mockery was only to stop him from becoming a warrior. Because with his strength, becoming a true warrior was suicide. And now, seeing her brother's eyes in the monster, she couldn't help but cry. Could it be that her useless but protective brother was still alive? After escaping, Anzi intended to flee in the opposite direction, but suddenly realized his sister was venturing deeper into the dungeon. Moreover, they seemed to have no intention of stopping. He knew the depths held terrifying monsters. Even his sister might not be a match for them. Thinking of this, Anzi decided to secretly follow his sister, protecting her safety. Along the way, his sister and her team encountered a dead warrior. This made the other two hesitate. However, his sister insisted they continue exploring. No one knew her motives, only she understood. This was the path her brother had taken. Perhaps retracing it would reveal clues about his death. But at this moment, the dungeon suddenly shook violently. A level 22 giant appeared before them. It seemed his sister was in grave danger. She had been loyal to humanity for over 20 years, yet they offered her to the demon race. The one who risked his life to save her was the sacred treasure of the undead. Deep within the dungeon, her team encountered a powerful opponent. It was a level 22 ogre. They were no match for it. Under her command, the other two diverted the monster's attention, while she began charging a powerful magic attack. However, they underestimated the monster's strength. A single punch easily sent one of them flying dozens of meters. Her magic was charged, but she discovered her ice arrows had no effect on the ogre. She was completely stunned, her hand trembling as she gripped her staff. But she didn't give up hope, instructing the others to buy her time to cast higher-level magic. This was the right choice, because compared to fleeing for their lives, risking a stronger attack to defeat the monster definitely offered a higher chance of survival. However, she still underestimated human nature. A warrior with fire attributes muttered, "She hides behind attacking, letting us charge ahead to die. Does she think we're fools?" She ignored her emotions, only urging her to hurry. At this point, the other warrior seemed to have made up her mind, exchanging a few words with the pink-haired girl. Then they charged the ogre together. According to the plan, the powerful attack she had charged for so long was enough to severely injure the ogre. However, at the crucial moment, the other two abandoned her and fled. She glared at them angrily, but was helpless. Because once the charging began, it couldn't be stopped. The ogre, no longer restrained, slammed into her, interrupting her spell and knocking her unconscious. Just as the monster prepared its fatal blow, an executioner devil suddenly appeared, saving her life. Anzi told his sister, "Don't worry, I won't let it hurt you." Unexpectedly, his first battle after becoming a monster was for his sister. This battle was a gamble with both their lives. He absolutely couldn't lose. However, a level 13 executioner devil challenging a level 22 ogre was unbelievable. Even though the ogre had a broken arm, Anzi felt his chances were slim. What puzzled him was why the ogre became more agile after losing an arm. After a few exchanges, he realized the ogre's intent. To win, he'd have to use some tricks. Lured by Anzi, the ogre charged, opening its mouth to bite. Anzi seized the opportunity, shoving his arm into the ogre's mouth. This led the ogre to believe it had Anzi restrained. But it didn't expect Anzi to tear off his own arm while it was off guard, directly biting into its artery. At the cost of an arm, Anzi defeated the terrifying ogre. In truth, his severed arm could regenerate with his recovery skill. A mere ogre dared to oppose the cheat-laden Anzi, truly courting death. After defeating the ogre, Anzi carried his sister out of the dungeon. Along the way, He retrieved the accessories he had dropped in the dungeon when he was still a warrior, and conveniently brought them out. Reaching a safe area, he placed his sister in a tunnel, while he hid nearby, waiting for human warriors to find her. After a while, 2 warriors discovered his sister and woke her. Upon awakening, she immediately began searching for Anzi. After asking the warrior beside her, she learned her brother wasn't there, but she clearly remembered her brother carrying her out. Just then, she noticed the accessory in her hand, seeing Anzi's name engraved on it. She finally burst into tears. "Brother, where are you?" At the same time, Anzi ran deeper into the dungeon, afraid his sister would see his current form. Further into the dungeon, my upgrade path begins. While fighting monsters to level up, a level 20 bat monster suddenly appeared in the outer area, and tried to kill me. Although I was level 18, facing a bat monster with no projectiles, I could only barely defend myself. After dodging several attacks, I was still carelessly severely injured by the bat monster. I could only run. Attack several times, my wounds worsened, and I encountered a chasm. No way back, only a desperate gamble. The bat monster quickly spat poison. As I reacted, the monster unexpectedly lost control, flying over the chasm. This was my chance. I jumped onto its back, pushing it down. Using my devouring ability, I bit its weak spot. Falling, the bat monster died. I can fly now, but I need a license, or I'll cause harm. With its death, I reached level 20, finally my long-awaited second evolution. From vampire to shapeshifter, the level limit is 50. This evolution brought larger size, and an irremovable mask. Shapeshifters can mimic humans. I can become human. Eagerly, I experimented. Using the ability, my body glowed. As the mask fell, I transformed from monster to human. My appearance was identical to when I was alive, with a human voice, albeit hoarse. This skill couldn't return me to society, it's only temporary. Transformation consumes 1 mana point every 10 minutes. I have 4 hours. If I run out at home, they'll keep my ashes. But there's hope. I can evolve for more mana, or see what the next evolution brings. More monster hunting and leveling up. The ground shook violently. I saw a high-level monster's corpse. This is bad. I'm on the outskirts. Why are there high-level monsters? Something happened deeper inside? Another bat monster charged. Now stronger, I'm not afraid. Easily dodging, I threw a rock. It spat poison. I cancelled my transformation, punched its head, pinned it, and killed it. You're too weak. Call me the Ancient King. As I gloated, countless bat monsters appeared. I'm doomed. I ran again. Abandoned by humans, a monster now. He still risked his life for them. Bound by a vow, a hero protects his homeland and people, remembering his human heart. Meeting these adventurers in human form, suspicion made the atmosphere tense. Shirley's innocence broke the stalemate. Not only Gerard, but the man was bewildered by the foolish girl. How could she be so unguarded? This gave him a chance to escape. Though he called challenging the Lord reckless, he joined them. I'll attack from behind, and flee if needed. A cautious objection. But they're the guild's strongest. If they can't do it, who can? The man thought the same. He disagreed with their unprepared challenge. But could he dissuade them? A fight might break out. If he lost human form, using monster powers, he'd hinder them and risk exposure. He agonized over going. But a voice argued back. Why be a talentless hero? Why endure ridicule? And not give up? Why are others risking their lives, while I fear exposure? He no longer hesitated. For his ideals, he accepted the battle. Shortly after they parted, the three faced the Demon King's enforcer. Its power was beyond them. A level 30 monster, far surpassing them. Even Frank's strike on its unprotected arm did nothing. Shirley's divinely empowered attack was met with disbelief. So was Gerard's. His arrow hit, but shattered. They found its weak point, the eye on its stomach. But bypassing its swords was hard. Facing the sword, Frank took the hit to help his team. He didn't expect the enforcer to use magic. A magic circle glowed, erupting in flames. The heat pushed Frank back. The brief contact badly burned his arm. Seeing Shirley's despair, Frank knew he had to boost morale. Unleashing Pure Blade Strike, he charged. Enduring the pain, he fought. With a powerful cross slash, he cracked its head. At his command, Gerard fired. But it failed. The monster raged. A heavy blow knocked the exhausted Frank unconscious. Gerard told Shirley to retreat, but she wanted to help Frank. He couldn't let her shield him. Gerard took Frank's place. Predictably, he fell. He regretted forcing Gerard to join. Gerard could have escaped. As the great sword fell, Shirley braced for death. But after a clang, no wound appeared. Opening her eyes, she saw him. In their despair, humanity's last hope, was the hero they called worthless. His monster form suppressed. He couldn't unleash his full power. A lapse led to a chest wound. Blood splattered, worrying Shirley. The dying Gerard, believing the man extraordinary, now felt this was his limit. But the man didn't retreat, he pressed forward. The pain of his wounds fueled his fighting spirit. Suddenly, a claw lashed out, raking the monster's eye. The searing pain disoriented the beast. The man seized the opportunity to withdraw, using regeneration to quickly heal. The real battle was just beginning. Flames once again swirled around the monster. The intense heat forced the man back slightly. But a boulder blocked his only escape route. The next attack was unavoidable. Is he going to die? Shirley cried out in fear. But in the next moment, a clawed hand grasped the descending blade. The man then drove his sword into the monster's eye. A roar of pain echoed through the cavern. This confused Shirley. The monster had struck the man, so why was it screaming? The surrounding flames and the monster's body had effectively concealed the man's transformed hand. However, the intense heat was still problematic for the man. The monster's strength had exceeded his expectations. He hadn't expected it to still be fighting, after sustaining such grievous wounds. These attacks seemed like the monster's final stand, though regeneration allowed him to withstand the flames. His mana was rapidly depleting. He knew, however, that the monster was also nearing exhaustion. His priority was to escape the flames and conserve mana. But the monster seemed to anticipate his thoughts, denying him the opportunity. But the monster seemed to anticipate his intentions, giving him no such chance. Gerard watched, understanding that, if this continued, they were all doomed. Despite his grievous wounds, he crawled towards his bow. With his remaining strength, he loosed an arrow. But whether due to exhaustion or not, the arrow missed its mark. However, the falling debris distracted the monster, finally giving the man a reprieve. In a flash, his sword plunged into the eye on the monster's abdomen. The agonizing pain forced the monster back. The relentless assault shattered the eyeball. The monster's writhing agony presented a perfect opportunity to attack. But his only weapon lay just out of reach, at the monster's feet. The opportunity was fleeting. Risking exposure, the man was forced to use his claws once more. Before his mana completely depleted, he lunged at the monster without hesitation. The claws in his hand accurately pierced the already torn belly. With a clear tearing sound, the stone golem Demon King finally collapsed to the ground, unresponsive. Within the dungeon, only the Demon King could gather the underground magic power. With its death, everything here would return to order. Of course, the system rewards for defeating the monster were also extremely generous. Gaining 4 levels filled the man with hope for future evolution. So much so that he didn't notice Shirley slowly approaching. "Thank you so much for saving us." "My name is Shirley." A voice brought the man's attention back. He panicked and hurriedly covered the species name on his status board. "May I ask your name?" Facing the girl's question, the man was in no mood to answer, as he only had 2 mana points left, and was about to be unable to maintain his disguise. Then, under Shirley's strange gaze, the man ran away from the scene again, giving away a priceless gem. The hero who saved humanity ran away in a panic. These words were unbelievable no matter who heard them, let alone coming from the mouth of Shirley, who loved to exaggerate. But it wasn't until Frank took out the giant magic stone that everyone realized all of this could very well be true. It's just that they still wondered why such a powerful adventurer was someone they had never heard of. Could it be, as Shirley said, a secretly trained prince? But only Gerard knew what Shirley was embellishing. Because that guy clearly had a pale, weak appearance. At the same time, a girl in the crowd couldn't help but worry, regardless of whether there really was a hero who dared to challenge a level 30 monster alone. She only hoped her brother wasn't caught up in the battle. But fortunately, the Demon King's disappearance at least made the western cave temporarily safe. But her brother didn't think so. The man in the dungeon had been hunting monsters continuously for many days. But after the Demon King was defeated, there were no more powerful monsters. The stagnant level made the man consider switching to a new dungeon. Therefore, the man had to enter the human world to gather some information first. But the fangs that couldn't be hidden and the mark on his face made it difficult to move freely in the crowded city. So some remote, dilapidated small towns became the man's primary targets. On the other hand, at the Lei Pao Guild in the capital, Frank had divided the reward this time into 3 equal parts. Although it was all thanks to that man, he had voluntarily given it up anyway. And if he really came back to claim it later, Frank said he could also return a portion. But at the same time, Frank gave a small portion of his share to Shirley. Shirley was both happy and scared, and immediately refused. but Frank said to consider it as travel expenses to go home, since she hadn't been home for a visit in a long time. But one thing is that you must pay attention to safety. Because they all knew that since the catastrophe, Shirley's hometown had become dilapidated. The place, slow to rebuild, had become a haven for violence and crime. And the money Shirley earned annually was donated to the church that raised her. But this was really meaningless. Because it was said that this fallen kingdom would be swallowed by the dungeon within this century. Compared to the gloom of the city, the people in Oldford didn't seem too bad. This was beyond the man's expectations. It felt great to be back in the human world after all. Actually, since he was human, he had heard his friends talk about this place. It was just that the rumored scene of corpses everywhere didn't appear. On the contrary, this chaotic, disorderly town was very suitable for his current state. But soon, the man felt the malice of this place. 3 red stones were placed down. They were the magic stones of the stone golem that the man had collected before leaving. He originally planned to rely on them to live here for a while. But unexpectedly, the boss only gave him 500 copper coins. It should be known that these could be exchanged for 10 times their value in the capital. However, the boss said that this was the rule here. Someone as weak-looking as the man having such valuable items, he could exchange them without asking about their origin, not even caring about the man's blood-stained clothes. But if the man wanted to escape from this place, he had to be careful. This feeling of being controlled was very unpleasant. But there was no other way, and in the end, the man still accepted the amount that was only enough to live for 3 days. But just when the man thought that the bad luck had finally passed, the misfortune had just begun. He was the hero who defeated high-level monsters. But he was cheated out of every penny in the city. He initially thought that the precious materials were enough to cover his expenses for a while. But unexpectedly, he encountered an unscrupulous boss. 500 copper coins for 3 priceless magic stones. Or he would use his unclear identity to threaten him. Helplessly, the man could only accept the meager sum. But the money in his hand hadn't even warmed up yet, when he encountered a blond man extorting him outside the door. Since the man had encountered this unexpected situation as soon as he stepped outside, he didn't dare to act rashly. But the blond man was certain of his outsider status, immediately accusing the man of theft, and demanding he hand over the stolen money. Only after reacting did the man understand that the blond man in front of him was just a thug. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he escaped the blond man's grip. But unexpectedly, the blond man fell flat on his face because of this. It turned out that this guy was just a paper tiger. The man even felt that this guy's strength was only at level 20. The mocking laughter of passers-by seemed to prove this as well. But Jeff, who always valued his face, how could he bear such humiliation? He drew his sword, wanting to risk his life against the man. Seeing that the situation was not good, everyone hurriedly tried to dissuade Jeff. The man took the opportunity to kick away the sword in the blond man's hand, and immediately fled the scene. It wasn't until he could no longer hear Jeff's helpless screams that the man stopped, panting. As night fell, the man in the room racked his brains but still couldn't understand how life could be even harder than in the dungeon. The terrible customs here, with just a small, old knife, had emptied the man's remaining meager funds. One day, the man got up early and went out wanting to find some useful clues, but after wandering around for a while, he gained nothing. The only thing certain is that everyone here wants to cheat me. But fortunately, at least no one here knows me. The aggrieved man could only comfort himself like this. But immediately afterward, a familiar figure blocked the man's path. It was the girl from the dungeon again. The man was truly speechless. He didn't understand how in such a remote town he could still run into someone he knew. Moreover, he remembered that this girl named Shirley already had level 18 strength. Why would a somewhat famous little adventurer come to this city? If she wanted to see his status board, he'd be doomed. Moreover, what did she mean by staring at him like that? But how could the man know that the pink-haired Shirley had already thought of a name for their child? She also didn't expect to meet her savior so soon. If this wasn't fate, what was it? But just as Shirley wanted to use gratitude as an opening line, the man said, "You've got the wrong person," and ran away, truly giving no chance for explanation. Although Frank once said that the man might be a criminal expelled from the city. But for someone so powerful to come to Ophir, a place everyone avoided, Shirley was even more convinced that the man must have his own hidden troubles. "I'm sorry, I won't ask about your past." However, Shirley's pursuit frightened the man. "She must have discovered my monster identity." "She definitely has." But immediately afterward, a wall blocked the man's path. Before the girl arrived, the man decisively extended his claws, climbing directly up the wall. Almost successful. But at this moment, the newly bought dagger slipped from his belt. That was 240 copper coins. The man, feeling the pinch, jumped down without hesitation to pick up the falling dagger. but this face-planting posture stunned the arriving Shirley. The clever Shirley blamed her recklessness for putting her idol in a difficult situation, hurriedly saying that she wouldn't infringe on her idol's privacy. This successfully reassured the man, as it meant he finally had someone to talk to. Right, I still don't have an answer. May I know your name? Looking at Shirley, sincere just for a name. The man didn't hide it anymore. My name is Crom Crank. To conceal his identity, the man came to a remote town. But unexpectedly, everyone he met was a swindler. Priceless magic stones were only exchanged for 500 copper coins. Conversely, a small rusty dagger took away almost all of his money. Even more unfortunate was the chance encounter with Shirley in the alley. This made the man, who had carefully chosen this place, a laughingstock. But fortunately, the kind Shirley consciously kept her distance from her savior, and firmly stated that she wouldn't invade her idol's privacy. This made the man truly acknowledge this naive girl. The reason Shirley, a small-time adventurer who had achieved some success, came to this city of crime, was because this was her hometown. This place was once a beautiful and kind town, but ever since the great disaster erupted in the nearby dungeon, countless monsters flooded the town, wreaking havoc everywhere. All the rich and powerful fled the town, cutting off contact. This ruined city became a haven for criminals. Although they successfully resisted the monster invasion, they also turned ordinary citizens into slaves. The righteous Shirley absolutely wouldn't allow her hometown to become a city of crime. Rescuing Ophir from darkness became Shirley's biggest goal from then on. This made the man change his view of her. He didn't expect this seemingly foolish girl to have such a grand dream. But now he still needed her to lead the way. After all, the roads here looked too similar. Shirley was naturally very willing to help with her idol's request. But immediately afterward, her expression suddenly stiffened, as she remembered that everyone had divided up the man's spoils. Shirley felt very apologetic and said that she could find the priest to get back a portion to return to the man. It turned out that as soon as Shirley returned home, she donated all her earnings to the church, as this was the place where she, an orphan, grew up healthy. The church was still raising several orphans, and income had become the biggest problem. This was also the reason Shirley still hadn't abandoned this place. The man really didn't intend to reclaim his property. But looking at his empty wallet, he was finally defeated by reality. 200 copper coins would be fine. Next was to find out the location of the surrounding dungeons. However, the appearance of a young boy interrupted the two's plans. It turned out that right after Shirley left, the church received 2 uninvited guests. Seeing the pattern on them, the priest immediately understood that these were bastards from the Evil Dragon Guild. The purpose of their trip was to expand their slave force, wanting to take the orphans in the church. The priest naturally couldn't let them do as they pleased. With a thud, he knelt on the ground, begging to be taken as a slave in place of these children. But how could the arrogant Jeff agree, and even insulted the old man for not knowing his place? This angered the hot-headed tyke. He rushed forward, using his newly awakened fire magic to attack Jeff. However, it was all in vain. Reno, who was beside him, just waved his hand and dispelled this weak flame. Let me teach you what real magic is. As he spoke, a clear magic circle appeared on his palm, facing the wall. In an instant, a large hole appeared in the wall. Seeing Reno getting closer and closer, in this critical moment, the priest could only pick up a spear and fight back. Although he knew he wasn't their match, at least it would give Tyke a chance to escape. Hearing all of this, Shirley had to bid farewell to Crom. But to her surprise, the man wanted to go back with her. Although it sounded like a tricky problem, as his only reliable source of information in this city, the man felt the need to face this trouble together. It wasn't until they arrived at the scene that the man realized this trip wasn't in vain, because the blonde man who extorted him was also there. He was the young master of the Evil Dragon Guild, but he lost to a newly awakened kid. Even a child looked down on him. The enraged Jeff wanted to catch the fleeing Tyke, but Reno stopped him. Now they needed to let this old man know who had the power here. As soon as he finished speaking, Reno pressed the priest's head to the ground. The loud noise finally attracted the children's attention. The priest immediately urged them to leave quickly. But when Jeff's long sword was placed against the priest's neck, the children were too scared to move. Seeing the stubborn priest still refusing to yield, the lightning in Reno's hand intensified. I want to see how much you care about these children. In an instant, a powerful surge of lightning power rushed in from behind, cruelly ravaging the priest's frail body. But even until his flesh was charred, the priest still refused to give in. The furious Jeff stepped on his head and issued an ultimatum. If you don't want to die, tell the children to obey. Otherwise, you know we can do anything. After speaking, he also made a disgusting act, spitting directly on the priest's head. The priest naturally knew he couldn't resist this evil force. His persistence was only to use his life to teach the children one last lesson. That is, in the face of evil and darkness, never back down. Jeff was really at his wits' end with this old man. About to die, and still wanting to preach. Reno, beside him, had lost all patience. Facing the priest's ridiculous persistence, he wanted to personally let these commoners know the consequences of resisting the evil dragon guild. However, at this moment, the sudden appearance of two people made Reno pause his actions. There were still people sticking their noses into other people's business at this time. Something Reno had never heard of. But Jeff quickly recognized the man among them. He, ignorant of the immensity of heaven and earth, even took the initiative to taunt the other party. That idiot actually thought the man had run away in fear, even wanting to duel the man right there. The man naturally also recognized this extortionist. But he just tightened his grip on the dagger in his hand, remaining silent. But unexpectedly, this blond man, when complacent, became talkative. Not only mocking his rusty iron dagger, but also saying the man looked like a cook who had never seen battle. How could he know that the man in front of him was a monster who constantly hovered on the brink of life and death? A casually swung sword would also make it difficult for him to withstand. However, he didn't want to accept this reality. Immediately standing up, wanting to slash at the man again. But what surprised him was that the opponent's counterattack speed was astonishingly fast. Seeing the blade piercing his chest, Jeff hurriedly retreated. But his armor was still pierced, leaving him injured. Immediately afterward, the man's blade was against his forehead. His instinctively trembling body made Jeff accept the reality that he was the weaker one. Seeing the killing intent in the man's eyes, the strong energy fluctuation alerted the man. It turned out that Reno, beside him, had created a huge magic circle. Immediately afterward, a powerful bolt of lightning struck the spot the man had just dodged. Reno's attack continued. Amidst the violent clash, neither gained any advantage. Reno now understood that this man was no ordinary person, but in his opinion, confronting the evil dragon guild for a dilapidated church, at least in his human state, he couldn't defeat him. I can see you are very strong and brave, but your weapon is truly terrible. Moreover, in this world of the strong preying on the weak are meant to be dominated. Even if we leave today, the result will remain the same. Acknowledging the man's strength, Reno tried to persuade him. If we truly fight, this place will suffer irreparable losses. But if you choose to retreat, I can choose not to interfere. This is my final warning, and also the last chance I'm giving you. Just because the result wouldn't change, he wanted the man to give up. So why did he persist on that impossible path of becoming an adventurer? He wouldn't just walk away. But this completely enraged Reno. He also didn't expect to have to exert all his strength in this place. You are truly. The man chose to confront the entire evil dragon guild without hesitation. It was just that at this moment, he didn't have time to pay attention to the situation behind him, which became an opportunity for a despicable villain. But fortunately, Shirley appeared in time, stopping the shameless Jeff, the young master of the evil dragon guild. Now everyone wanted to oppose him. The enraged Jeff wouldn't show mercy just because his opponent was a girl. But he soon discovered that even if his opponent was a woman with a lower level than him, she was still a tough fight. Shirley naturally saw his confusion. That's because Jeff would never understand the importance of resolve when facing a challenge. Against scum like him, Shirley had absolute faith that she couldn't lose. On the other side of the battlefield, Reno, unable to persuade any further, started to get serious. Magic enveloping lightning onto a sword was something the man had never seen before. Every attack was accompanied by thunder. The explosive energy was simply not something he could currently withstand. Even the sword in his hand would be instantly destroyed. But what could he do? Facing Reno's stronger and wider range attacks, the man couldn't even get close to him. Should he cancel his disguise? But how could he dare reveal his true face in front of these children and Shirley? Not to mention exposing his identity. If he scared Shirley, it would likely backfire. Was there really no other way? At the same time, the light in Reno's hand intensified. He used 2 magic spells simultaneously. Before the man could be too surprised, a bolt of lightning struck. Most of the skin on his arm was burned. However, this was just the beginning. Although the man reacted immediately, he was still pressed by Reno. Immediately afterward, countless lightning bolts condensed on his blade again. It was too late for the man to raise his sword to block. With a crisp, shattering sound, the lightning sword easily pierced through his defenses, stabbing directly into the man's waist. Although he avoided a fatal blow, the powerful lightning force still made his body smoke. However, Reno quickly noticed something unusual. Because his sword was stuck fast, unable to be pulled out. Moreover, the blood from the wound quickly stopped flowing. And what was with the color of his skin? Before Reno could understand what was happening, The man's suddenly surging aura made him shudder. Then, with just one punch, Reno was knocked unconscious on the spot. It turned out that the man deliberately let Reno stab him. Before that, he had restored his skin to its monster state. Then, by activating regeneration, he instantly healed the wound caused by the sword. This left Reno with no time to react to the series of strange events that had just occurred. Still able to make such calm judgments in a critical moment. Although he didn't know exactly what had happened, the priest's expression was enough to show his astonishment. Of course, the one who couldn't believe it was the flamboyant Jeff. But at this moment, looking at the two blades pointed at him, his face no longer held the same smugness as before. After all, they were the most powerful guild here, naturally not lacking in methods to escape. A cloud of poisonous smoke instantly obscured everyone's vision. With the sound of shattering glass, one of Jeff's feet stepped onto the windowsill. But before leaving, he didn't forget to leave behind harsh words. Going against the evil dragon guild will not end well. You will definitely pay for your actions today. Finally driving away the hateful person made Shirley breathe a sigh of relief. But the man beside her was lost in thought. Actually, he also knew that this time it was just luck. If such a situation happened again, would he be able to maintain his identity? They were the most powerful force in the region. But they were no match for a newcomer. Just because the man glanced at The Art of War by Sun Tzu of the Great Celestial Empire. A single lure the enemy deep tactic made the old man run in circles. And one punch made the old man vanish. His dumbfounded companions, no longer as arrogant as before, fled in panic, jumping out of the 80th floor window. However, just chasing them away wouldn't solve the real problem. Shirley knew very well that the people from the Evil Dragon Guild would definitely return. But the suggestion to move everyone to the capital didn't seem feasible. Getting the children there safely wouldn't be easy. Moreover, the high living expenses and taxes weren't something they could afford. The helpless reality made Shirley distraught. The kind priest said they would take care of themselves. But the more urgent matter now was for Shirley and the man to quickly leave this place. Such narrow-minded people, after suffering a loss, would definitely come back for revenge. The two of them would definitely be their primary targets. On the way back, Shirley thanked the man again for his help. But the road ahead and how to proceed made her feel uneasy. Looking at the girl's confused expression, the man swallowed the words he was about to say. He planned to return to the inn to rest for a day, with no plans for tomorrow yet. So, he instinctively wanted to ask about Shirley's plans, but suddenly realized that this didn't seem like the right time to ask. Because he believed that as long as Shirley was here, he would definitely intervene in the church's affairs. But the reality of being pursued made him unwilling to implicate the church. In this dilemma, it would be very difficult for him to make a decision. So, the man changed the subject. Shirley, can you tell me about the dungeon and the specific decline of Oudfur? It turned out that when the new dungeon appeared, the kingdom sent an army to suppress it. But that 20-man army was completely annihilated. The unknown danger made the capital unwilling to waste resources here anymore. Since then, this place had been abandoned by the kingdom. What kind of power could even the kingdom be helpless against? Amidst his doubts, the man had a new idea. Because he was worried about the lack of strong monsters to help him level up quickly. This level of dungeon should be enough for him to stay for a while. As for the rampant criminal gangs like the Evil Dragon Guild, after the threat from the dungeon was gone, wouldn't the kingdom come to reclaim this place? At the same time, in a dark room, Jeff was kneeling on the ground, trembling. Before him was the leader of the Evil Dragon Guild, Lord Garrett. Garrett, notoriously cruel and powerful, held supreme authority here. Even he liked to be called the monster of Oudfur. But today, he was especially furious because Jeff had deserted and lost to a brat. This tarnished the Evil Dragon Guild's reputation. If it weren't for more important matters, he swore he would kill Jeff. Camila, why did you reduce the number of dungeon guards? If that place isn't properly controlled, it will be very troublesome, you know? Camila, a high-ranking member of the guild, remained stern, unafraid of the monster before her. That was because there was a more pressing matter at hand. The kingdom's army had appeared in the town, and it was estimated that even more were lurking in the shadows. North of the town, a figure climbed onto a roof. The disaster cave didn't seem difficult to find. A giant entrance lay in the wasteland. The man, well rested, was ready to enter. But the residents leaving their homes early in the morning caught his attention. It turned out that, at some point, a monster had infiltrated the town. Indiscriminately thrown fireballs destroyed houses. The unarmed residents could only flee in panic. The man hurriedly approached and finally understood. The Evil Dragon Guild was no longer protecting this town. Seeing the monster's fireball about to hit the panicked villagers, a flash of light suddenly appeared, deflecting the fireball. Immediately afterward, a cloaked woman stepped out from the crowd. At the same time, the man's attack also landed. Just one sword strike severely injured the monster from the disaster cave. This was beyond the woman's expectations. Since when did the town have such a powerful adventurer? And strangely, why did her sword react to him? He stood up to protect the people and was burned. But the villagers, instead of being grateful, pointed their swords at him. On the contrary, the demon King Garrod, who always committed evil, became the savior they longed for most at this moment. As the man was preparing to head to the disaster cave, a one-eyed beast appeared, shattering the town's tranquility. The man, wanting to save the people, slashed at the monster, although the surprise attack injured it. When he wanted to continue his pursuit, the monster easily blocked it, until the woman beside him began to cast a spell. A holy light enveloped the sword. The man quickly realized this was similar to Reno's magic. The only difference was that the holy attribute was more effective against evil power. The next second, the woman clapped her hands, and the monster in front of them was instantly split in two. Everyone cheered at this incredible power. However, at this moment, the woman fell into deep doubt. Because holy power and evil magic power would generate a weak attraction. But the magic in the sword just now reacted to the man beside her. This made the woman puzzled. Although this man had joined forces with her to eliminate the monster, the appearance of a high-level adventurer here was indeed suspicious. And she always believed that holy power wouldn't react to ordinary people. But as the woman was about to investigate, the enthusiastic villagers suddenly stood behind the man, shielding him. Thank you both so much. If it weren't for you two, the village would have been burned to the ground. The surrounding villagers grew in number. But the man didn't feel any joy, because being exposed in front of so many people was very dangerous for him. However, a little girl's words, "Thank you, great hero," made the man feel an unprecedented glory. But the joy was short-lived, as the woman's horrified scream immediately brought him back to reality. It turned out that the one-eyed beast wasn't dead yet. It was condensing another fireball in its hand. The woman realized her oversight, as there had been no death notification sound just now. The next second, a holy shield lit up again. This time, the woman planned to block the fireball and then stab the monster's eye. But unfortunately, the monster's target wasn't them, but the unprotected little girl beside them. As quick as a flash, the exploding fireball flew towards the little girl. But the woman's shield couldn't change direction in time. Everyone's hearts tightened. The next second, the light from the fireball's explosion engulfed everyone's vision. Then, another green light flashed, and the monster was completely split in two, vanishing. The little girl was still standing there, completely unharmed. But everyone's expressions turned to fear, because a larger and more powerful monster had appeared. It turned out that just before the fireball hit the little girl, a monster's claws blocked it. And that was the man, who had completely revealed his true form. Even if it meant revealing her identity and never seeing that little girl again. Even if it meant being covered in wounds. She still wanted to give up everything to protect her, because that was the real reason she wanted to become an adventurer. Although she didn't regret her choice, reality still made her pay the price for her actions. At this moment, even the concerned gaze of the great hero transformed into the disgusting stare of a monster. The companion who had just fought alongside her had now become a mortal enemy. Everyone pointed their weapons at the man, some even complaining about the evil Dragon Guild's absence at this time. However, the man wasn't surprised. She could understand the villagers. And she wasn't doing it for any reward. At worst, she could just run away. After all, that's what she always did. At the same time, a stone flew past the man's face. Countless enraged villagers seemed to have all become heroes driving away the monster, to blend into the human world. She always wore a mask, but the disguise that wasn't broken by facing life or death situations was completely shattered by a little girl, just because she didn't want the rain that had once drenched her to fall on someone else. However, along with the change in identity, no matter how much effort she had put in before, it all vanished into thin air. In everyone's eyes, only the ugly monster and the hateful enemy remained. A monster trying to learn and integrate into human society. This sent chills down the woman's spine. It seemed that it must be killed before it escaped. However, the little girl's call made the woman stop. Although the woman explained that it was a man-eating monster, and even the little girl's father emphasized that it was a terrifying monster, the little girl still didn't understand. The little girl didn't understand why her father and everyone else were driving away the hero who protected the town. Even though he looked a little strange, he hadn't harmed anyone. The father, wanting to retort, couldn't find any better reason to answer his daughter other than saying it was a coincidence. The little girl was still defending the man, tears welling up in her eyes with emotion. "Didn't you see the way he looked at me just now, Dad? He was clearly checking if I was okay." All the villagers stopped. Only ashamedly bowed heads remained. "I told you to be discreet." Back at the base, the woman was being reprimanded by the captain. It turned out that the woman's name was Mira. Was the man in red related to the monster disaster? At the same time, the man finally reached the dungeon entrance. Revealing his identity made him lose his only refuge. But for this town and the people here, his resolve to destroy the disaster cave remained unshaken. The man swore that this time, he would definitely evolve, acquire new skills, and return to Ordville. Scene change. Shirley finally decided to leave the church. She knew clearly that under the Evil Dragon Guild's rule, monsters were appearing more and more frequently. She couldn't wait until she became strong. She also couldn't guarantee what would happen to the children tomorrow. If neither the kingdom nor the Evil Dragon Guild wanted to protect them, then no matter how reckless her decision was, she had to destroy the disaster cave herself and save this town. A girl shining for her hometown. A monster boy never giving up on his dream. Two people from different worlds, both striving for the same good. Two people who should have parted ways. Both entered the disaster cave without hesitation, facing the dungeon that once annihilated the royal squad. Even if they only advanced a little each day, they had to ensure enough rest time. But the only advantage here was being able to freely use his monster form. The terrain here was very complex, making him wander around a lot before finding the Lord. And sure enough, the man was quickly stumped by a three-way intersection. After thinking for a while without coming up with any good ideas, he had to rely on the sword in his hand. It was the sword he snatched from Reno last time. Indeed, much better than his old small dagger. Guided by fate, the man quickly got his answer. However, fate seemed to be playing a trick on the man. Before he could take 2 steps, his ankle was entangled by something, and the man fell flat on his face. He didn't understand how there could be spider webs here. But on second thought, he dismissed the idea. Because if it was spider silk, how big would that spider have to be? However, just as the man got up, 2 giant demon spiders fell from the sky. Encountering monsters so quickly was beyond the man's expectations. But before he could think too much, a huge magic circle formed. The man wanted to flee, but found that the spider silk on his leg couldn't be removed. The next second, countless stones flew from the magic circle, and the man became a living target. Fortunately, the level of these 2 wasn't too high, so the damage was bearable. However, just as the man drew his sword to cut the spider silk, the demon spider reacted instantly, spitting out another wad of spider silk. And this time, it bound the man's right hand. Feeling uneasy, just as the man was about to act, his other hand was also bound. Just like that, the man was completely captured by the 2 monsters. The 2 smug demon spiders seemed to let out laughter. But did they think they could restrain the man like this? If the spider silk has bound my hands, it means you 2 are also within my grasp. In an instant, the roles of hunter and prey were reversed. The spider silk originally used to control the man now became their own obstacle. The 2 small monsters were quickly beaten senseless by the man, losing all their fighting strength. When they awoke, what awaited them were the man's sharp claws. A green light flashed, and 2 experience points were collected. The man took this opportunity to level up to 26. But this place was truly unusual. Although they were only level 23 monsters, appearing on such a shallow floor was quite rare. It seemed that the leveling speed here would be faster than expected. And after several battles where he fought above his level, the man wasn't worried about encountering monsters higher level than himself. Of course, if they were only slightly higher, it would be even better. Suddenly, an aura from deep within the cave sent shivers down the man's spine. Next, several green lights appeared in the darkness. They were giant demon spiders, level 36. The difference was too great. The man really hated his jinxing mouth. Whatever he said, it would appear. The next second, a brutal impact grazed the man. That terrifying speed was completely disproportionate to its heavy body. The man knew he couldn't be a match for this monster. The best option now was to escape. The man didn't believe that monsters of this level were everywhere. As long as he temporarily got rid of it, he would be safe. And the narrow cave in front of him was his chance. Seeing the demon spider about to pounce on him, the man jumped into the cave. A place this small, you can't chase me in here. But before he could rejoice for even a few seconds, the man was stunned by the sight before him. What the hell is this? The man realized he had been tricked. It deliberately forced him here, with no way back. He could only face it. Moreover, he had hoped for these powerful monsters to evolve quickly. And if he couldn't even defeat monsters of this level, how could he conquer this disaster cave? To save the human child, she didn't hesitate to abandon her only refuge. But in return, she received disgust from the depths of human hearts. However, the man was still willing to shed blood for the town. It was just that this new journey had encountered a major problem right from the start. She could easily deal with 2 appetizers, but this 6-eyed spider had forced her into a corner. She initially thought that the narrow cave entrance could block the spider. But unexpectedly it moved flexibly there. Suddenly, the monster lunged, shattering the rocks at the cave entrance. Next, its sharp claws raised high, aiming to kill the man in one blow. But perhaps limited by its large body. Its speed was fast, but its accuracy was poor. And this was the advantage the man could exploit in close combat. But at this moment, a red light began to condense in the spider's mouth. The next second, a red beam shot straight towards the man. The sudden increase in speed almost made him unable to dodge. The man understood that this must be one of its skills. But now he could only hide behind the rock to avoid it. But surprisingly, the next red beam grazed the man's scalp, splitting the rock in two. The terrifying power frightened the man. If he was hit, he would definitely die on the spot. The man understood that he couldn't continue dodging. Finding a way to approach it and end the battle quickly was his only chance. And the astute man also quickly discovered that the spider always had a preparation period before firing the red beam. So, as long as he continuously attacked it, he could prevent it from using its skill. However, before the man could be proud of his discovery, countless webs came crashing down. If he was bound, wouldn't he become a target? Unexpectedly, a monster had such battle awareness. The man was both astonished and realized that he had been driven into a corner. What should he do now? His large body would definitely be an easy target. If only he were a little smaller. That's right, a little smaller. The man suddenly had an epiphany. How could he forget such an important thing? At the same time, a large amount of webbing spewed out again. The intense pain stimulated every nerve of the spider. But the man's hand movements hadn't ended yet. He withdrew the sword and aimed for the remaining eyes. The threat to its life finally made the spider act. Multiple claws stabbed towards the man at odd angles. But he really didn't have much time left. The next second, the man gripped the sword in his hand, and without hesitation, severed his left arm. In an instant, the hand wrapped in spider silk was pulled into the monster's mouth. But strangely, the man didn't appear fortunate to have escaped. On the contrary, he looked as if his scheme had succeeded. Suddenly, 5 claws pierced through the spider's head, and the man's sword immediately afterwards stabbed into the spider's head. Perhaps it wouldn't understand even in death what kind of existence a monster warrior was. The 300-pound spider bit off the man's hand, only to have its head pierced by unexpected claws. It turned out that everything was within the man's calculations. The monster's body gave him powerful attack strength. Regeneration allowed him to withstand damage without hesitation. And the warrior's intellect further allowed the man to exert power far beyond his level. Just looking at his severed arm, he still felt fear remembering it. He couldn't believe he had actually defeated a level 37 black spider while being lower level. But fortunately, the corresponding reward was also very worthwhile. Gaining 7 levels brought him a big step closer to his next evolution. But this battle also completely exhausted him. The recovery after regeneration had consumed the last of his remaining magic power. The man had to rest for a while before continuing his next challenge. But at the same time, there was also an ironic thing, which was that the man felt more adapted to life in the dungeon. At least here, he didn't have to worry about anyone discovering his secret. Soon, the man continued his new journey. But the complex terrain made him keep returning to the same spot, although the monsters along the way helped him level up. At this rate, he didn't know when he would find the Lord. However, as the man was eating spiders to recover his strength, a footstep caught his attention. Because his intuition told him that this wasn't the footstep of a monster. But who would come to this dangerous place alone? Shirley's appearance was truly beyond the man's expectations. Because he couldn't understand how she could get here. It wasn't until Shirley took out a map of the disaster cave that he realized how poor his preparation had been. He didn't even know such a thing existed. The map, recording the paths and monster information, would definitely provide great convenience. But even so, Shirley, a warrior of this level, shouldn't be venturing in here. And the man quickly guessed the reason for her arrival. Give me the map. You should go back the way I tell you. The sudden order made Shirley feel an unprecedented coldness. But the expression on the man's face couldn't be faked. Shirley clearly understood that it was a feigned sternness out of concern for her. But even someone unrelated to this place could challenge the disaster cave alone. So what reason did she have to back down? I'm sorry, I won't go back. This place, which annihilated the kingdom's army, isn't somewhere you can handle alone. But you'll only be a burden here. The man still wanted to use words to send her away. But unexpectedly, Shirley was so determined. She had even taken back all the money she donated to the church, to buy hay to deal with the demon spiders, and sapphires to counter vampires. Compared to Shirley's thorough preparation, the man realized that he might have been too reckless coming here. And it could be seen that Shirley's resolve wasn't something he could shake. Considering that her information was very useful for clearing the dungeon, and his current camouflage could last for 9 hours, the man finally agreed to Shirley's request. At the same time, at the Evil Dragon Guild, Keneela brought information about a series of events that had occurred in the town in recent days. But to her surprise, compared to the kingdom's army infiltrating in disguise, the act of an ordinary adventurer entering the disaster cave angered the fearsome Lord Garrett. An ordinary adventurer. Why should he mobilize the entire Evil Dragon Guild? An ordinary-looking map. Why wasn't it something an outsider like him could easily access? It turned out that every clue here was exchanged for countless lives. They not only had to avoid the eyes and ears of the Evil Dragon Guild, but also explore the dangers of the cave themselves. To create such a detailed map, however, the Evil Dragon Guild relied on the disaster cave to control this town. Once the town restored its original function, they would also completely lose control here. Therefore, even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, Garrett would absolutely not allow such a thing to exist. At the same time, elsewhere, the two who had just decided to cooperate quickly ran into trouble. 3 six-eyed spiders rushed towards them. Having to deal with these monsters while worrying about Shirley put the man under considerable pressure. But immediately afterward, Shirley pushed his hand away and rushed forward. Next, a black cloth bag flew straight towards the spider. Just as it was about to hit, the cloth bag burst, scattering countless small particles. Miraculously, the spider's eyes instantly blurred. Before, she had to rack her brains to defeat one. But now she easily eliminated 3 six-eyed spiders. And more importantly, the maze that once made her wander for a whole day. She now found the right path instantly. Of course, she understood that this was all thanks to those who came before, who used their lives to draw this detailed map. This map carried all of Shirley's hopes for her hometown, for her trust and recognition. The man was also willing to fight for this town. The unexpected determination stunned Shirley, as she clearly remembered the man saying he came here to level up. At this moment, a hint of emotion that even she herself didn't realize appeared in Shirley's eyes. However, danger struck again. A sharp claw reached out from the darkness, grabbing directly at the man's chest. Although he reacted in time and blocked with his sword, the unexpected force sent the man crashing into the wall. It was a level 42 lord. This was probably in existence second only to the leader, and the truth was quickly confirmed by Shirley. However, the attack wasn't over yet. The red magic stone in his hand lit up, and the magic stone containing fire energy instantly enveloped the monster's body. Intense flames quickly spread throughout its body. At the same time, a sword flashed, ending the battle without giving it a chance to breathe. The man couldn't believe that this time, exceeding levels was so easy. And unknowingly, he was only 10 levels away from his next evolution. Although it wasn't certain he could complete it before reaching the leader, the current leveling speed was astonishing. From a skeleton gradually taking on a flesh and blood form. Perhaps next, he would be closer to a human. The man secretly hoped in his heart. But now wasn't the time to think about these things. Regaining his composure, the man asked Shirley about the leader's location. It was said to be a giant titan gorilla. Countless knights and adventurers had died at its hands. Of course, it wasn't invincible. It had a fatal weakness, which would be the key to their victory. However, a trace of worry flashed through the man's heart. He only hoped to finish the battle before his camouflage ran out. Would the abandoned town finally be saved? The final boss of the disaster cave. The Titan Gorilla. It was like the heart of the entire dungeon, controlling all the magic power here, driving countless monsters out of the dungeon. As long as it was eliminated, Ortville would be completely at peace. But the danger behind it went without saying. The man had also considered facing the monster alone. After all, it was an existence that had annihilated countless knights and adventurers. But he had to admit that with Shirley's help, his chances of winning were indeed much higher. But the man still wanted to confirm again. Are you sure you don't want to go back? Of course. I've made thorough preparations to deal with the monster. Although I know my strength isn't enough to fight it, occasionally distracting it should still be possible. Seeing Shirley's determination, the man didn't try to persuade her any further. He just didn't know that Shirley was even prepared to sacrifice herself. At the same time, the surrounding environment began to shake. A tall figure gradually emerged from the darkness. It's finally here. The Titan Gorilla. The huge level difference forced the man to concentrate intensely. Those sharp claws were terrifying, because the Titan Gorilla had extremely fast movement speed. Its metal-like claws became its life-reaping weapons. Of course, this wall-crawling monster also had its weaknesses. Since its feet were much smaller than its body, its speed could only be advantageous in a straight line. Therefore, as long as they moved in a Z-shape, they could effectively dodge its attacks. But was that really the case? Only when truly facing the Titan Gorilla. could one feel the terror of this monster. Its speed was unbelievably fast. Even using the Z-shaped movement, the distance was quickly closed by it. The cold claws gradually approached. At the critical moment, the man dodged, making the attack miss again. But the man understood that he could dodge for a while, but not forever. Just one hit, and he could instantly lose his fighting ability. But could he keep dodging like this? Until the Titan gorilla closed the distance again. Its giant hand swiped at the man. But this time, it was blocked by the rocks on the wall. And this would be the man's chance to counterattack. The source of the Titan gorilla's power was also its greatest weakness, which were its disproportionately small feet. However, such an opportunity still didn't yield significant results. He originally intended to use this method to reduce its movement speed, but the result was negligible. The man was astonished. It was unbelievable. However, at this moment, another sword ripped through the air, stabbing directly into the Titan gorilla's back. It was Shirley's surprise attack, but the result was still astonishing. The tip of the sword couldn't even pierce its skin. The Titan gorilla's body was as hard as metal. But at this moment, the Titan gorilla was completely enraged. It swung its arm, sending both of them flying. Shirley worriedly looked at the man. But fortunately, he was only slightly injured. One regeneration could easily heal the wound. But because of this, the man's magic power began to decrease drastically. He couldn't use skills recklessly. Otherwise, he would reveal his true form prematurely. The situation became more critical. At this time, he couldn't even secretly revert to his original form like last time. After all, the distance between the two was too close. And once Shirley discovered his true form, he was very worried about whether she would panic. But if they didn't defeat the Titan gorilla quickly, they might not have a chance of survival. He was the great hero in the little girl's eyes. But he never dared to reveal his true face. Because God had given him a second chance at life. But at the same time, played a huge joke on him, turning this brave but flawed warrior into a monster form despised by everyone. So much so that even when he risked his life to save the human child, he was still cursed and beaten by the villagers. But even so, he still chose to save this declining town, entering the disaster cave and eliminating the monsters that were ravaging the town. However, the Titan gorilla's power still exceeded his imagination. Even with Shirley's help, it was still very difficult to effectively damage it. Seeing his magic power running out and his camouflage about to break, to avoid revealing his identity in front of Shirley, Crom had to end the battle quickly. And the first thing he needed to do was draw the Titan gorilla's attention back to him. Because Shirley's physique was very weak, it was clear that she couldn't dodge any of the Titan gorilla's attacks. So, Crom decisively picked up a stone from the ground and threw it directly at the back of its neck. However, perhaps the Titan gorilla's skin was too thick, as it didn't react at all. If that was the case, then he couldn't be blamed for being impolite. Raising the sword in his hand, Crom accurately slashed at the long tail behind the Titan gorilla. The intense pain made the Titan gorilla roar. Turning around, it unleashed a powerful swipe. But unfortunately, Crom had anticipated it and easily dodged. Attacking its tail didn't cause fatal damage, but it did attract its attention. That was enough. Next was to continue moving in a Z-shape to avoid its wrath. It was clear that Crom had gradually adapted to the Titan gorilla's attack rhythm, accurately dodging the opponent's claws every time. However, the Titan gorilla became even angrier. It didn't want to be toyed with by these flies any longer. So, it opened its mouth, preparing to use its ultimate move, demonic breath. Crom immediately recognized its intention. It could be seen that he had truly angered it. This was a type of neurotoxin that quickly incapacitated people. Although its duration wasn't long, it could quickly cover the surrounding space in a short time. However, Crom didn't intend to stop it, because this skill also had a fatal flaw. Quick as a thought, seizing the opportunity, Shirley immediately took out the small bag she had prepared beforehand, and threw it accurately at the Titan gorilla's head. The Titan gorilla was startled by this unexpected object, but instinctively it didn't hesitate to tear open the bag in front of it. Immediately, countless dust particles flew everywhere. Crom and Shirley immediately covered their noses. As for the unprepared Titan gorilla, as expected, it began to cough violently. This was poisonous mushroom spore powder. With such a large dose, even a giant creature like the Titan gorilla couldn't withstand it. Soon, it couldn't even open its eyes. The opportunity for the humans finally arrived. But Shirley loudly stopped the man. Because before that, he had to throw out this magic stone. Although the Titan gorilla's tail didn't have eyes, it could accurately determine the location of its prey based on the heat emitted from a creature's body. Therefore, just a heat-emitting magic stone could deceive its tail. Sure enough, the Titan gorilla mistook the magic stone for a living creature, and attacked the target without hesitation. However, this misjudgment completely exposed its weakness. The real opportunity finally arrived, and Shirley was the first to counterattack. But unfortunately, whether it was due to their poor weapons, or Shirley's weak strength, the wound on its thigh didn't change significantly. Crom decisively revealed his monster fangs. After all, compared to claws, revealing his teeth had a much lower probability of exposure. And the effect was truly remarkable. He tore almost the entire muscle mass. The unprecedented pain made the Titan gorilla scream miserably. Its body also uncontrollably fell to the ground in pain. At this point, the Titan gorilla's most powerful weapon had been taken away. The situation completely reversed. Crom and Shirley continuously inflicted more wounds on the Titan gorilla. As long as they continued to attack, even the strongest fortress couldn't hold on for long. However, just as things were progressing in a good direction, Crom discovered an astonishing fact. It was that this Titan gorilla also had regenerative abilities. Seeing the torn thigh about to heal completely, a strong sense of danger washed over him. After all, if they failed, it would mean a similar tragedy would repeat itself in Ordville. That was something Crom absolutely wouldn't allow. After all, he didn't hesitate to use his monster body to become an adventurer, precisely to prevent such a disaster. He jumped up, slashing directly at the monster's head. The threat to its life also completely activated the Titan gorilla's potential. A powerful King Kong punch hit the man's chest. Unexpectedly, the dying gorilla could still unleash such power. This made Sherry worry about the man. However, Crom simply adjusted his breathing and immediately returned, because he knew he couldn't delay any longer. Of course, the gorilla also didn't have much time left. The man's sword attacked again. But this time, the gorilla dodged. Because Crom's target this time was not its head, but the Titan gorilla's heart. Clearly, this attack was effective. Blood sprayed from its chest. The Titan gorilla finally perished, along with a large amount of experience pouring in. Crom's level directly rose to 47. This meant he was another big step closer to his next evolution. But more importantly, the big trouble in the disaster cave had truly been resolved. However, before they could enjoy the joy of victory, a group of uninvited guests suddenly arrived. The disaster cave that troubled the town was finally destroyed. So was the day of destroying the evil dragon guild far off? But the truth was, before the kingdom's knights arrived, trouble found them first. Right after Crom killed the Titan gorilla, Sherry was finally able to relax. Tears welled up, and she couldn't calm down. However, Crom was frightened. He thought Sherry was injured or something, but she was actually fine. It was just that thinking about the children and the priest finally being freed, she couldn't hold back her tears. Actually, this wasn't wrong. After all, Ordville had been abandoned by the kingdom because of the disaster cave. Now that the dungeon had been cleared, they just needed to send troops to expel the evil dragon guild, and he believed Ordville would soon regain its former prosperity. The bright future also made Crom feel at ease. He unconsciously used regeneration to heal his wounds. But as soon as he did, he regretted it. After all, he didn't have much magic power left. It would be a waste if he revealed his true form now. Crom immediately looked out the window to check. Fortunately, the continuous leveling up had replenished his magic power, and when he found himself only 3 levels away from the next evolution, he couldn't help but feel joyful, because this meant he was one step closer to becoming human again. However, this never-before-seen joyful expression made Sherry stare. Although thanks to Crom, her level had also soared to 28. Getting out of the cave was still a long way off. After all, even though the leader had been killed, there were still many other monsters in the cave. So, before that, they had to be fully prepared. Actually, this was also what Crom wanted to say, because his magic power was also running low. However, at this moment, a hand suddenly reached out from the darkness. A fireball flew straight towards the man. If Sherry hadn't noticed it first, and risked her life to take the hit, Crom might have been exposed. Crom looked at Sherry in astonishment. He didn't understand why the evil dragon guild was here, and his figure looked terrifying. Was he even human? The person Crom noticed was Garrett, the boss of the evil dragon guild. Garrett was also quite surprised that a small adventurer could reach here. However, someone was unconvinced. Jeff angrily looked at his old enemy, and despite being humiliated many times, loudly proclaimed he would teach Crom a lesson. Crom ignored him. Instead, Sherry spoke first, saying that they had defeated the Titan gorilla. The evil dragon guild's reign would soon be over. So why didn't they run before the knights arrived? Sherry's original intention was to scare these people away, but she clearly underestimated the audacity of these bastards. Sherry's act had no effect on them, instead causing them to mock. Don't think we really couldn't defeat the Titan gorilla. A monster of that level, as long as our boss takes action, he alone can easily handle that damn monkey. Impossible! Sherry angrily retorted. After all, this was something they had worked so hard to achieve. However, this was indeed the truth. Because from the beginning, the news about the knights being wiped out by monsters was fake. The evil dragon guild knew everything about the disaster cave. So they released a fake map, then hid in the disaster cave first, and took the opportunity to kill the knights who came to support. So, they had no intention of leaving Ordville. After all, as long as no one knew the disaster cave had been cleared, everything would continue as usual. The evil dragon would still rule this land. Because they only needed to occasionally release a few monsters to slaughter them in the town. Or they could even create incomplete corpses themselves. Endless fear would still make the villagers dependent on them. Sherry listened with despair on her face. She couldn't believe that all her hard work had resulted in nothing but a pile of useless lies. The bastards in front of them slowly walked towards them. From Garrett's mouth, Sherry was even more horrified to hear the word rape. The situation became even more critical. All the burden fell on Crom's shoulders. The dangerous aura emanating from Garrett gave him reason to believe that what they said was true. At this point, Sherry burst into tears, filled with guilt towards Crom. After all, she had taken advantage of his kindness, which had put him in danger. The life-threatening situation made Crom's fists tremble. He understood that Sherry had lost her ability to fight. But he certainly wouldn't blame Sherry. After all, she was seriously injured protecting him. It was just that facing so many people alone, he really didn't have any confidence. Could it be that he could only give up? That was absolutely impossible. After all, even when he knew his skills were trash, he didn't give up and still firmly followed the path of an adventurer. When he became a skeleton, he had endured so many hardships on the road to pursuing a human form. Even if the final result was only a few hours, he still persevered. Compared to all of that, what was there to be afraid of now, just fighting a few bastards? He had already died once anyway. What reason did he have to give up? After reassuring himself, Crom resolutely stood in front of Sherry. But in the eyes of the evil dragon guild, he was just struggling in vain. A swordsman, without saying a word, rushed forward. His strength was clearly superior to Jeff's. With just a slight carelessness from Crom, his chest was slashed. Completely overwhelming swordsmanship. The thick-faced Jeff jumped out again, spewing all kinds of trash talk. He even used the children in the church to provoke them. Sherry was completely desperate, having lost all will to fight. But Crom couldn't fall. He had to stand up and face these bastards. The sword in his hand swung again. But this time it was blocked by Jeff. At the same time, the two teammates beside him also took the opportunity to act. 4 arrows hit Crom. For an ordinary person, such injuries would certainly be fatal. But Crom stood up once again. This made the pervert Jeff even more excited. After all, he was thinking of capturing this man alive to feed to the dogs. So let's start with your left arm. As he spoke, a sword slashed straight at Crom's left shoulder. But this time, a loud explosion rang out in the air. At this moment, Jeff was so scared that he was speechless. Because what blocked his sword was the claw of a monster. And the owner of that hand was the one he despised from the bottom of his heart. The man hit by 4 arrows hadn't died yet. His girlfriend was even thinking about what to buy. But what no one expected was, he stood up once again. Only this time, he was no longer the hero in her heart, but in a never-before-seen monster form. The appearance of the evil dragon guild was something Crom hadn't anticipated. In addition, Jeff kept pressing, further reducing his living space to the extreme. So, he was forced to reveal his true form to block this fatal attack. Initially, he only revealed his left hand. But that alone was enough to terrify the idiot Jeff. This sudden transformation naturally also attracted Sherry's attention. She knew Crom had recovery skills, but she had never heard of him possessing such astonishing power. And that strange arm always gave people a sense of unease. However, witnessing all this, Garrett didn't show any worry. On the contrary, he was greatly intrigued by this man. At this moment, Crom was extremely worried. The reason he didn't want Sherry to see his true form was because he knew his glorious image in Sherry's heart. But actually, he was the same. If Sherry hadn't given him infinite trust, he wouldn't have had the courage to step out of that dark dungeon. Although their first meeting in Ortville was still awkward, compared to the fear in his heart, Sherry's enthusiasm brought him more than gratitude. So, what he was always worried about was that Sherry would be angry with him for feeling deceived. However, in this precarious situation, he didn't have time to worry about such things anymore. You want to kill me? Come on! The number 1 cannon fodder immediately flew into a rage, swinging his sword and charging forward. Facing the continuous attacks, Crom finally decided to stop hiding. Disguise. Immediately, a green light enveloped his body. Before the number one cannon fodder could finish his sentence, the sounds of bones breaking and flesh tearing rang out. Because his body had been torn apart by Crom's claws. He even saw his lower body separate before slowly closing his eyes. The blonde Jeff hiding behind was so scared that he didn't know what to do. Although Keneela immediately realized that it might not be a skill, she couldn't tell what it was. On the contrary, Crom was strangely calm at this moment. He had clearly never killed anyone before. But it felt incredibly natural. Perhaps it was a survival instinct triggered by danger. Or maybe he was inherently a monster. The horrifying scene frightened the evil dragon members. They knew their own strength. They couldn't possibly capture such a monster alive. But facing the approaching monster, they could only draw their bows and arrows. But this time, as expected, it was all useless. None of the arrows could penetrate the monster's skin. They discarded the useless tools, their last hope resting on the swords in their hands. But don't think Crom had an absolute advantage. Although the monster body brought him many benefits, his limited health and magic power also made him very wary of these continuous attacks. So, direct confrontation was clearly unsuitable. His strongest weapon now was to exploit the evil dragon member's fear. Facing the incoming mace, Crom chose not to dodge but to block it with both hands. This would expose him to a huge opening. As expected, there was a fool who actually thought he was right and rushed forward. At that moment, Crom suddenly stomped hard, opening the mace, and letting out a sharp roar. The powerful pressure immediately stunned the fool in place. And in that moment of distraction, Crom easily swatted away his opponent's weapon. Next, sharp fingers slid across his throat. A head flew into the air. Without any rest, Crom immediately turned and charged towards the mace wielder. The mace wielder was stunned by the monster's series of actions. Caught off guard, he could only use his face to block the opponent's punch. And the result was his brains splattered everywhere, blood flowing freely. 2 consecutive kills helped Crom level up. The supplies he received were also his biggest weapon in the next battle. The monster's power was clear for all to see. Continuing to attack was simply suicide. Keneela also noticed the members' anxiety. Such a situation was clearly very bad. Her members were becoming increasingly fearful, even losing their will to fight. But the monster in front had completely abandoned any retreat. Now it just wanted to kill as many people as possible. The serious situation had exceeded expectations. But there was no other way. The small fries were all dead. The 2 mages couldn't possibly charge into battle, so the remaining people could only grit their teeth and endure. Initially, they thought they would take advantage of the time their teammates were fighting the monster. The 2 mages, including Keneela, would provide long-range support. But the truth was, they had no chance to attack. That monster always cleverly hid behind their teammates. They couldn't attack their own comrades. But Keneela quickly noticed something unusual. That monster was always staring at her. In other words, it deliberately stood in the way to prevent her from attacking. A monster with intelligence. This completely exceeded Keneela's understanding. The deadlocked Crom wasn't much better off, because these 2 were clearly much stronger than the previous ones. Moreover, there were 2 mages in the distance always staring at him. He couldn't let himself continue to be consumed like this. So, this time, he focused his power to attack one of them. But while he managed to kill his opponent, his stomach couldn't avoid being hit by an arrow, taking damage. But this was actually part of Crom's plan. Just as the man thought he had finally succeeded, a sharp pain suddenly appeared in his abdomen, and his body was lifted high. Without hesitation, Crom immediately dragged the body and ran forward. And his target was the 2 mages in the distance. Keneela was completely terrified, forgetting even to use magic. Fortunately, her teammate reminded her in time, and he unhesitatingly began chanting a fireball spell. Although the arrow in the monster's hand wasn't completely dead yet, he still threw the fireball out. Immediately, the violent explosion created more flames. The entire cave was illuminated. Although it was to stop the monster from advancing, personally killing his teammates still made this man feel a bit uncomfortable. However, where he couldn't see, the system notification sound of receiving experience rang out again. The monster emerged from the flames unscathed. The man thought he could use magic again before the monster arrived. But he clearly underestimated its speed. His head spun. 674 experience points were collected again. Crom's level successfully reached 49. At this point, Garrett finally understood that this guy single-handedly killing the Titan gorilla wasn't a lie. And he would personally greet this interesting man. A monster warrior who wanted to protect his homeland but became a demon. A freak in town who desperately saved his mother but was abandoned. Both survived in despair, but walked completely different paths. As soon as Crom eliminated most of the minions, Garrett's eyes locked onto him. The final battle was about to begin. Swinging his giant axe, Garrett made the first move. The seemingly clumsy weapon displayed surprising speed. The continuous attacks gave Crom no chance to counterattack. The strange axe blade drew a red shadow in the air. Just a simple probe almost cost him his life. Crom couldn't help but be astonished by Garrett's strength. Looking at his opponent's information, although he was only one level higher, his current condition was too poor. For Ordfil's freedom, he was willing to sacrifice himself to perish together with his opponent. Only now, even that was a luxury. So, he had to do something to turn the situation around. It was clear that the glowing giant axe was the cause of all this. So, Crom decided to use the last bit of his magic power to restore his left arm to its best state. Next, he didn't hesitate to take the initiative and attack Garrett. Seeing this, Garrett showed excitement. The blood-colored axe blade swung again. This time, as expected, it hit the opponent. But a hint of surprise flashed in Garrett's eyes, because the always sharp axe stopped this time. The monster's physical strength far exceeded his imagination. The price for carelessness was giving Crom a chance. Sharp fangs bit straight into Garrett's chest. However, Garrett wasn't a fool. Having roamed the streets since childhood, he was well versed in these sneak attack tricks. At this moment, he didn't expect the monster's real target was the weapon in his hand. A powerful bite gripped the axe. Then Crom suddenly shook his head, and the giant axe flew out. Garrett came to his senses, his face full of anger. But it was too late. What awaited him were only Crom's sharp claws. Crom, exhausted, seized this last opportunity, jumped high, and lunged straight at Garrett's head. But strangely, Garrett didn't retreat. Instead, a smug smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Immediately, his arms were covered in purple crystals. Crom only felt like a 10,000-ton boulder had slammed into his face, making his head tilt to the side. His already weak body was knocked back several meters. In the end, Crom miscalculated. Garrett's strength wasn't in that giant axe, but in the skill that created this crystal armor. It was a desperately unhappy family. The mother was forced to sell her body for money, and was beaten daily by her alcoholic husband. Even the young boy was scolded and driven out to beg. Otherwise, he would be brutally abused. The mother was clearly unable to take care of herself, but always reached out to save her son. The boy watched with heartache, but he himself had no strength to resist. Until this day, God's mercy finally came to him. Strange purple crystals appeared on his arms, and his physical strength increased dramatically. He accidentally killed that bastard. That was the first time he awakened his skill. He thought life would get better, but unexpectedly, his mother just hugged the father lying on the ground, and looked at him with disgust. Monster! A few short words destroyed the last bit of goodness in the boy's heart. So, he decided to give up everything. From that day on, he became the monster in the eyes of everyone in Ordfil. Now, this monster was staring at Crom lying on the ground. What do you think? Even without a weapon, I'm still stronger than you. He was right. Crom had exhausted his magic power, and had no strength left to continue. Breaking through that purple defense was even more difficult. Was there really no chance left? At this moment, Jeff suddenly jumped out from the side. He also realized that the situation was now completely one-sided. So, at this moment, he started cheering for his boss. But unexpectedly, this became Crom's opportunity to turn the tables. Just as Garrett's diamond punch came rushing, Crom seized the opportunity to roll, managing to dodge this ferocious attack. However, Crom didn't stop, but continued to roll forward. He wanted to pick up the short sword, then adjust his posture, ready to attack. But in Garrett's eyes, this was just a futile struggle, one-legged monster already in the coffin. What use is there in picking up that sword? That was because he didn't know what Crom really wanted to do. Wasn't just picking up the sword, but also silently shortening the distance to Jeff, and killing the fool with one sword strike. When the system announced Jeff's death, Crom finally leveled up. Garrett, oblivious, stared ahead. He didn't understand why the man was standing there dumbfounded. Had he given up? At this moment, a voice allowing evolution rang out in Crom's mind. A monster's evolution would bring it closer to its ideal state. And Crom's dream had always been to restore his human form as soon as possible. But now he didn't dare to have such extravagant hopes anymore. Whether it was to defeat Garrett, save Ordfil, or to protect Sherry, to survive with her, at this moment, Crom only wanted the power to overcome everything. For this, he was willing to accept any form, no matter how bizarre he would become. A sharp roar echoed throughout the cave. Thick black fog continuously poured out from his body. A strange feeling arose in Garrett's heart. He didn't understand what kind of strange magic it was. Until the noise subsided, Crom's figure reappeared in the fog. Only this time, he had become a terrifying monster. The monster warrior who only wanted to become human again. finally let go of his obsession. Because in the face of a powerful enemy, he had to seek greater strength. With the hasty departure of the fool Jeff, Crom finally entered his third evolution. A pair of horns grew on his strange bald head. Slender limbs replaced his eyes. The price for abandoning his human form was becoming a summoner who could control illusions, bringing both the fear of his appearance and possessing the power to directly attack the soul. Evolution during battle was something Garrett hadn't expected. But this didn't affect his determination to defeat this guy. A similar diamond punch came crashing down. The difference was that this time Crom didn't dodge, but directly blocked it. At the same time, his other two hands also moved. A faint green light quietly appeared, as if taking something away when it touched Garrett's abdomen. That was the soul drain skill after Crom evolved, stealing the opponent's memories, while also absorbing their magic power to replenish himself. This meant Crom could use regeneration without worry, and could also fight endlessly. Garrett retreated in pain. But more than that, there was unease in his heart. The sudden disappearance of his strength made him start to fear the monster in front of him. He didn't understand what had happened. Only his intuition told him he couldn't continue like this. So, he immediately shouted the name of his stunned subordinate beside him. Even the strengths he had once looked down upon, he now had to mobilize. However, in front of Crom, it was all useless. When the eye on the back of his hand opened, the surrounding vision immediately became distorted. But fortunately, the arrow was still fired. Kanila's fireball also hit the monster. Kanila was so excited she almost screamed. But when she looked closely, she discovered the monster in front of her was twisting strangely. Instead, it was her boss, with a sword in his chest, his whole body emitting black smoke. Kanila was terrified, but even more puzzled. She had clearly hit the monster. Garrett was about to go crazy. At this moment, he truly regretted calling those two idiots for help. But he seemed to have forgotten he was still on the battlefield. After successfully neutralizing the interference from the evil dragon minions, Crom's claws attacked again. Garrett had to pay the price for his distraction. Crom, replenished with energy, gradually grasped the situation, and Garrett was left with only the path of death. The underestimated Garrett was furious, immediately wanting to risk his life against Crom. Only in his rage, his attacks became chaotic. Not only did he fail to hit his opponent, but he was also easily dodged by the monster. Garrett guessed it was because of the light around the monster. It would evoke fear in people's hearts, making their minds chaotic. So, when Crom used the illusion again, Garrett deliberately held his spirit firm, constantly reminding himself to stay calm. But when that image actually appeared before his eyes, he couldn't help but feel his heart pound. Because it was his father's face, covered in blood, angrily questioning him. "Garrett, how dare you kill me?" Fear from his childhood flooded in, and Garrett's legs began to tremble uncontrollably. But that was all. "Go back to hell. I'm no longer the weak child I used to be." A roar completely dispelled the darkness, also allowing Garrett to regain his senses. The fist covered in purple crystals slammed hard into the monster's head. Looking at the monster lying on the ground, Garrett finally regained his confidence. Just with this trickery, how could it defeat him? However, the scene before his eyes also became distorted. The trick he looked down upon was precisely what defeated him. Because what he defeated wasn't the monster at all, but his mother, currently lying in a pool of blood. Garrett couldn't believe it. This was the person he least wanted to think about. Also the one who hurt him the most deeply. His barely stabilized mental state completely collapsed. His mind sank back into the darkness of his childhood. At this moment, he reverted to his younger self. A faceless dark shadow was constantly approaching him. Although his reason told him everything was fake, fear still lingered in his heart. "How dare you attack your father? A bastard like you will be torn apart and fed to the dogs." Under the threatening words closing in step by step, he tried to push the other person away, but found he couldn't use any strength at all. He returned to his weakest and most helpless self. Helpless screams filled Garrett's mind. In reality, he also no longer had the strength to resist, because Crom's claws had spread all over his body. Received 2868 experience points, leveled up from level 50 to 51. The cold notification sound rang out as usual, but at this moment, it was like a eulogy for Garrett. The town attacked by the evil dragon was finally liberated. But the hero who turned into a monster for it. Who will save him? The heavily injured Garrett gradually lost his breath. But Crom still held him tightly, not stopping yet. Defeating the leader of the evil dragon did surprise him. But what was even more surprising was the earth-shattering changes the third evolution brought him. He could feel the power contained within these hands. One was creating illusions to devour the opponent's inner self. The other was stealing the opponent's memories and magic power. Crom was gradually accepting this body, but at the same time, he still had some things to deal with. Garrett's fall was undoubtedly a heavy blow to Kanila. But for the others, what was more worrying was their own safety. So, Crom only roared a few symbolic times, and they fled in terror, completely forgetting the trembling Kanila. Fortunately, Crom didn't want to kill them at all. After all, the evil dragon guild without a leader couldn't cause any trouble. On the contrary, what Crom needed to consider more was where he should go. Now that the demon ape was dead, the evil dragon was also destroyed. The promise to the children had been fulfilled bit by bit. They would surely have a peaceful and happy life. But what about the promise to himself? From Sherry's horrified expression, it could be seen that this was gradually drifting away. She must have been very shocked. After all, who would have thought that the adventurer traveling with her was such a terrifying monster? But this might not be a bad thing. Because Crom had revealed his identity in town, so his departure from Ordville was certain. If Sherry heard this news from the villagers, with her personality, she definitely wouldn't believe it, and the final result might be her continuing to chase after him. So, letting her witness it with her own eyes was probably for the best. Thinking of this, Crom felt even more that he needed to leave, perhaps not just Ordville, but maybe he should stay away from the entire civilized world. From beginning to end, what he pursued was only escape. After all, he had truly died a long time ago. Now he was just a monster, and no matter how he disguised himself, he couldn't change this fact. Even if he could see his sister again in the future, it would probably be the same scene as today. So, leaving was probably his best option. It wasn't that Crom wanted to make himself into some tragic figure. After all, he had been so weak and helpless, and now he could accomplish the miracle of saving the town. This alone was enough for him to be proud of. Only, he seemed to have underestimated Sherry's determination. Despite the double blow, Sherry even struggled to stand up. But she still resolutely hugged Crom, who was preparing to leave. This unexpected action startled Crom, unaware that Sherry was also so confused. She didn't know what she should think, let alone which choice was the right one. But at this moment, she could clearly feel the loneliness in Crom's heart. So, I thought I should hug you. The girl's warmth made Crom's heart tremble, but at this moment, he didn't know how to respond. Only staring blankly as the girl timidly withdrew her hand. Saying she wasn't afraid would definitely be a lie. After all, Sherry's pounding heart proved everything. But in this fog, there was one thing she was 100% certain of. That Crom, you are definitely a good person. Combining this with everything that had happened, Sherry finally understood why this man always acted alone. Why he was afraid of being seen by others. He was indeed concealing his monster identity. But in the end, he still entered the disaster cave with her to save the town. Most importantly, he actually did it. So, Sherry immediately decided to help Crom stay in town, to show her determination. Sherry even deliberately raised her voice, unaware that this made her already weak body lose its last bit of strength. Sherry collapsed uncontrollably, and fell into Crom's arms. Sherry truly had a pure world in her heart, because she truly believed the town could accept Crom. Looking at this innocent girl, a pang of heartache arose in Crom's heart. She was clearly so seriously injured. Yet she still tried to think of ways to help him until the very last moment. Her words were indeed very encouraging, but in reality, if she could forget everything about him, it might be the best choice for her. Crom unconsciously channeled magic into his palm. Could it also modify other people's memories? He thought so and did so. Unaware of how long she slept, Sherry drowsily woke up. At this moment, there were many people around her, and she wasn't in the disaster cave anymore. But she clearly remembered that after she and Crom defeated the demon ape, and were preparing to deal with the surrounding evil dragon guild members. Why did she suddenly appear here? That's right, where's Crom? Sherry frantically asked everyone about a white-skinned man. But how could they have seen any human? After hearing a monster's roar and running here, you were the only one we found. Witnessing all of this, Crom felt relieved to leave the forest. Sitting alone by the cliff, he began to quietly admire his achievements. Because at this moment, Ordville was bathed in golden light, like a girl dancing just for him. Truly beautiful. Not long after, the news of the Hell Lord's defeat spread everywhere. Ordville finally welcomed a long-absent festival. Sherry also became the town's savior. But along with the town regaining its peace, a monster-wanted poster also appeared on the streets. News of the demon ape's demise spread far and wide, and the crimes that plagued the town quietly receded. What should have been left for the people was not just celebration. But the truth was, except for Sherry, no one remembered the hero behind it all. Initially, people still couldn't believe that the demon monkey had actually been defeated. But when news came that the capital was about to send a lord, all doubts vanished. Everyone finally no longer had to live in fear of monsters. From this day forward, The celebratory banquet dedicated to the hero Sherry lasted for several days. But only Sherry knew that the one who truly defeated the monster was the missing man. The disbandment of the evil dragon guild was undoubtedly also his doing. Everything was actually Crom's accomplishment. But where did he go? Wasn't he our true savior? A monster portrait was suddenly posted on the tavern wall. A cloaked man stared intently, until an enthusiastic girl invited him for a drink. The awakened man politely thanked her and declined. The ponytailed girl was puzzled because the celebratory banquet had been going on for several days. But this guy just sat here staring at this painting, and had never celebrated with them. Of course, although the dungeon has been taken care of, that doesn't mean we're absolutely safe. The woman rambled drunkenly, but the man didn't reply a word, until the familiar back of the man caught Sherry's attention. She immediately ran over to greet him, because her intuition told her that this must be Crom. But when the man slowly took off his cloak, it revealed a completely unfamiliar face. Sherry awkwardly and hurriedly explained that she had mistaken him for someone else, and apologized repeatedly for her rudeness. A small incident didn't affect the townspeople's festivities. The man also left on his own, but as his palm brushed his face with a green light, Crom's face reappeared. He hadn't intentionally deceived Sherry. After all, he couldn't walk around with a face everyone knew. Although the third evolution doubled his magic power, and the disguise could last for more than a day. Even if discovered, he could still use illusions to deceive others, not to mention he could also erase their memories. But it was still quite troublesome, and casually interfering with other people's memories always felt very wicked. So, this departure wasn't to escape, but on the contrary, for Crom to continue pursuing his goal. Actually, this was also thanks to Sherry. It was her recognition that gave him great motivation, and also gave him the courage to face Camille in the future. So, this time he decided to return to his hometown, Clodat. At the same time, in another luxurious room, two men were plotting something. I heard you can control dungeon disasters. Is that true? The older, frail-looking man spoke first. Opposite him was a luxuriously dressed young man with red hair, exuding confidence. Yes, Lord Mesdo. We, Devin's Claw, are an alchemy organization researching the secrets of dungeons. After centuries of accumulated research, we can now control dungeon disasters. Mesdo's eyebrows suddenly lit up. It sounds like the fate of the world is in your hands. But why seek out a mediocre lord like me and not the royalty? A faint smile appeared on the man's lips, as if he had anticipated this question. Of course, it's because you have a better understanding of the greatness of this work, and you will also respect researchers like us more. Devin's Claw hasn't never cooperated with the rulers of the world. Only historical experience shows that when these kings achieve their goals, so-called heroes like us are discarded. Over time, the nation and its people begin to take this for granted. They no longer have gratitude, and if we get in their way, we are even considered enemies. But if we can secretly use this power to control the world, wouldn't that be a more interesting proposition? Only, before initiating this plan, we need sufficient influence. So, Lord Mesdo, we will help you become the king of this world, and Devin's Claw will also serve you. Mesdo was frightened by this crazy idea, but it had to be said that it was indeed an attractive plan. Mesdo's eyes lit up, outwardly appearing as if admiring a gemstone. Clearly possessing the power to save the world but doing the work of a devil, yet inwardly agreeing with this man. But Aishi, having just sat down, raised a new issue. Because they couldn't control disasters arbitrarily, complex preparations were needed beforehand. For example, to deal with abysses in different states, they needed sufficient dark magic. And to actually use it required even more conditions. As a series of problems were laid out on the table, Mesdo had to reevaluate Devin's Claw's capabilities. It was likely that before receiving his support, Aishi would have to demonstrate sufficiently convincing abilities. So Aishi, already prepared, took out a map from his chest. Their first target was a city with serious trade problems, Hoven. And the root of this problem was due to a larger and wealthier city to its north, Lokat. Next, Aishi put forward a bold hypothesis. If a dungeon disaster were to coincidentally occur in Lokat, wouldn't the money and goods originally belonging to it flow to Hoven? Hearing this interesting plan, hope flickered in Mesdo's eyes once more. He had even greater expectations for Aishi's promise. Clearly the hero who protected the town, yet treated as a monster hung on the wall, just because when the young man destroyed the evil dragon, he himself completely transformed into a monster. The glory that originally belonged to him now became the burden of staying here. Fortunately, the girl's sincerity empowered him, both comforting his soul and giving him the courage to face the past. However, nearing Lockdat, Crom encountered a monster. Fortunately, this three-eyed white wolf was only level 16, a good test subject indeed. A thought struck Crom, unsure if it was feasible. So, as the white wolf lunged at him, he didn't kill it outright, but adjusted his stance, aiming for its head. Soon after, his jet-black claws were coated in a familiar blue light. Soul Hand. As the eye on his backhand opened, the white wolf's magic power surged towards Crom. But the process only lasted a few seconds before the wolf broke free. Instead, the wolf's claws were now incoming. This time, Crom didn't hesitate, punching the white wolf's head hard, knocking it to the ground. Initially, he wanted to see if he could interfere with the target's memories during combat. But the truth was, before he could even touch the opponent's memories, the white wolf broke free. Effectively manipulating memories could only be done after defeating the opponent. Clearly, this wouldn't work on agile monsters. He could only steal their magic power, nothing more. Having reached this conclusion, Crom decided not to waste any more time. Jumping over the white wolf, along with the system notification of 3 experience points, the white wolf's body instantly shattered into pieces. Crom knew that the greater the level difference, the less experience gained. But 3 points was truly pathetic. However, something else bothered him more. He'd never seen this type of monster before. And so close to Claudette. Monsters of this level shouldn't appear. A sense of foreboding arose. His instincts told him something unnatural had appeared in Claudette. But Crom prayed it was all an illusion. In the bustling city, the late-night tavern was still crowded. Only Arthur frowned, unable to recruit new members. Though his close friend tried to comfort him, saying it wasn't easy. Arthur felt it wasn't that simple. Someone was deliberately obstructing them, and the reason went without saying. Not long after that incident, they were stopped by a girl. She was that guy's older sister. The last time my brother was seen, he was entering the dungeon with you, right? Arthur immediately understood her meaning but didn't admit it. The girl's face darkened. All right, I'll be blunt. You took my brother into the dungeon, and then, for some reason, you ran to save yourselves, abandoning him there, didn't you? Though unsure how she knew, what she said was completely accurate. So, Arthur had reason to believe she was spreading the rumors. He even felt people whispering behind their backs recently. The intense self-doubt made Arthur uneasy. His close friend looked at him with concern. Arthur, what's wrong? Ever since that incident, you've been acting strange. However, this sensitive statement completely triggered Arthur. He immediately grabbed his friend's collar, yelling at him not to mention it again. Moreover, he didn't think it was his fault. It was that kid's bad luck, being so low level and bringing the wrong equipment, almost getting them killed in the monster's lair. If it weren't for my wise decision, we'd all be dead. Arthur grew more agitated, almost climbing onto his hooded friend. But one thing he was increasingly certain of was that he wasn't wrong. He wasn't a murderer. So why did that girl look at me like that? As for her spreading those rumors about us, I won't forgive her. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Crom finally returned home, but remained tense. Though he kept telling himself he wouldn't be discovered, his behavior became increasingly unnatural. His furtive appearance made it hard not to see him as a thief. At this time, Camille was diligently practicing magic in her room. A lifelike ice bird appeared within the magic circle. Clearly, his magic control had improved. But Camille still felt it wasn't enough. He needed to be faster, stronger. Witnessing this from outside the window, Crom was filled with heartache. It was just like Camille to still be practicing magic so late. Crom thought it was good just to see him. The problem was, what excuse to use to leave after meeting him? He still needed to level up and evolve to have a chance of regaining his human form. Besides, Camille seemed fine. So his appearance wasn't necessary. Perhaps just seeing him doing well was enough. In just a moment, Camille's desk was covered with various animals. He seemed a bit tired. He slowly stood up. Was he going to rest? Crom, hiding outside the window, wondered. But just then, Camille took a dagger from the drawer. Crom immediately recognized it as the weapon he had once used. And at that moment, Camille suddenly changed, losing the determined look he had while practicing magic. Tears welled up in his eyes. The most frightening thing was him saying he would soon go find his brother. This startled Crom, who immediately burst through the window. Camille was shocked, instantly raising the dagger towards the window. But upon seeing the figure clearly, Camille was speechless. He couldn't believe his brother was still alive. Only after confirming this undeniable truth did he angrily reproach his brother for doing such dangerous things. Just like every time before he went out, he reminded his brother to be careful. Camille didn't know why he yelled like that. He clearly had so much to say to his brother. When Crom apologized, the room fell silent. He placed his hand on Camille's shoulder, gently saying, "Of course, how could I not worry? You've been looking for me too, haven't you?" The emotions that were about to burst forth now completely collapsed. Camille couldn't hold back anymore, throwing himself into his brother's arms, sobbing. "You're right, idiot." The older brother who once boasted he would protect everything had now become his younger sister's burden. All because the boy awakened an unprecedented revival skill. It wasn't helpful for an adventurer, and he didn't even have a chance to use it. Conversely, his younger sister displayed extraordinary talent. Powerful weapon-based attack magic completely overwhelmed him. The gap between them widened, and in his younger sister's eyes, there was a hint of disgust. He thought his cold younger sister wouldn't care about his departure. But when Camille held the weapon he had dropped, with an unprecedented sadness on his face, Crom realized he was wrong. What younger sibling wouldn't worry about their older brother? However, before Camille could enjoy this long-awaited reunion, Crom said he had to leave immediately. Camille didn't understand. He didn't understand why he couldn't stay home, nor what had happened to Crom. Crom could only apologize. Not only could these things not be explained quickly, but more importantly, he didn't want to reveal his monster identity too soon. As long as he continued to evolve, he could still regain his human form. Although his previous choice made him look much more frightening, he still believed he could recover. And by then, my level will be very high. Recalling his past weakness, Crom couldn't help but sigh. It was the day they buried their parents. Camille cried heartbrokenly. As the only man in the family, Crom naturally had to be strong. So, he promised his sister, "One day, I will become a hero and protect you. I will change this world, so that what happened to our parents won't happen to anyone else." A young man full of ambition, that was Crom back then. So, when unfair fates befell him later, one can imagine his suffering. But it must be said that it was these fates, and the identity he hated, that made him as strong as he was today. Therefore, he had to continue on, taking a distorted and bumpy path to realize his grand ideal. "So, I'm sorry, Camille. I promise to come back after I become strong enough." With that, Crom didn't look back, pushing the door open and walking out. By the time Camille reacted and chased after him, the deserted street was empty. The surroundings were silent, as if nothing had happened tonight. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the watchtower overlooking the city suddenly flickered. Kevin, the watchman, was still asleep, until a series of buzzing sounds suddenly woke him. He discovered the sensor was flickering unprecedentedly. Kevin suspected equipment malfunction, but when he went to the window to verify his guess, the sight before him stunned him. A horde of never-before-seen monsters was charging towards the city, led by a jet-black wolf king, many times larger than its brethren. Its true identity was a lord monster nurtured by Devon's Claw. Half an hour earlier, a silver-haired girl had entered the dungeon. Seeing Fenrir, not even 100 days old yet grown to this extent, the girl admired her master's skill. But Fenrir didn't seem to recognize her, opening its bloody maw and biting towards her, until a purple orb was taken from the girl's pouch, releasing a familiar scent. It was magic imbued with her master's scent. Fenrir immediately realized this strange girl was sent by his master. So, it obediently let her lead it out of the dungeon. And that meant when Kevin discovered the monsters, the silver-haired girl was nearby. There weren't many signs of struggle in the watchtower, only the sound of weapons piercing flesh. But the injured one wasn't Kevin, as imagined, but the girl who suddenly appeared. As the city watchman, who wasn't experienced, Kevin was naturally the first to recognize the danger, and the first to make the right choice. The girl found it hard to believe. She couldn't believe a grown man would hesitate to kill a girl like her. It was because Kevin sensed she was much stronger than him. Moreover, seeing her wounds healing, he knew stabbing her was futile. So, the more important thing was to warn others of the monster invasion before being completely killed. However, the girl wouldn't give him the chance. Facing the spear thrusting towards her again, the girl just smiled faintly, and vanished before being hit. The giant sickle, disproportionate to her size, carved a long line in the air. As expected, the line landed behind the man. The searing pain instantly incapacitated him. Kevin understood the vast difference in their strength. He shouldn't have attacked. Looking at the dying man, the girl apologized. "Actually, I quite enjoy pain, just not sure if you do," she said, as the giant sickle slowly approached Kevin's wound. Then, she gently lifted his face. "Tell me, where is the city guard?" Kevin, understanding her intent, naturally refused. The price was the sickle digging deep into his bone. The intense pain made him lose consciousness. But the girl had a strange smile. With a slight movement of her palm, a brilliant golden light quickly healed his broken body. Kevin slowly regained consciousness, his face filled with astonishment. Why would the enemy heal him? The answer was obvious. The girl asked the same question again. Kevin didn't want to die, couldn't die, not out of fear, but because he hadn't warned everyone yet. Thanks to this strong will, he endured countless tortures, until the girl grew bored. finally giving up on tormenting this dull man. From then on, a belief echoed in his mind. Can anyone hear me? Please protect Claudette. And someone else shared this belief, currently wandering the late-night streets. He won't go to that dangerous dungeon to look for me anymore. Immersed in joy, Crom completely missed the approaching person. They collided, and Crom was scolded. But upon seeing the person's face clearly, Crom froze. Past scenes flashed back. It was a face he could never forget, even in death. Arthur. The one who killed the innocent boy. He was the one responsible for the boy's death. He was also the hero who created the monster hero. When the two met again, the first to break down was the perpetrator. While Crom was still immersed in the joy of reuniting with his sister, the man he bumped into stunned him, because it was a face he could never forget. Arthur! Crom! You bastard, you're still alive! Arthur also immediately recognized him. But he clearly didn't believe it. After all, there were so many insects back then. They would definitely have devoured him completely. The only explanation was that he really had revived thanks to the resurrection skill. But with his strength, he couldn't have escaped that dungeon on his own. Moreover, he hadn't seen Crom before today, so it was strange no matter how he thought about it. On the contrary, Crom, the victim, was much calmer. He was more concerned about whether this face would constantly cause him unnecessary trouble. Perhaps he should use illusion magic to change his appearance, but on second thought, this wasn't practical, as it would constantly consume his magic power. Therefore, he should be more careful and avoid running into acquaintances like today. But in any case, he felt that Arthur was the only person who shouldn't blame him for disappearing mysteriously. However, reality was always contrary to expectations. When Crom looked closely under the moonlight, he discovered that Arthur was now thin, haggard, with vacant eyes and a broken spirit. It was hard not to think of him as an addict. At this moment, he suddenly went berserk, drawing his weapon as if to fight Crom to the death. Because he finally understood, Crom must have turned into a demon and come back to seek revenge. Crom was stunned. What was going on? Turning into a monster, Arthur guessed half right, but he really hadn't come back for revenge. But Arthur was clearly delirious. It's because I threw you into hell. That you hate me, right? The accumulated mental pressure had turned his guilt into endless killing intent towards Crom. Now Crom also realized Arthur's mental state was unstable. If he continued to tangle with him here, it would probably attract attention quickly. So, Crom also slowly reached for his weapon. However, this only confirmed Arthur's suspicion. I knew it. You really came to kill me. Crom was truly helpless. Didn't you draw your sword first? I will definitely send you back to hell. You useless piece of trash. Arthur cursed and vented his anger. But his fighting skills were really mediocre. He didn't know if it was because Arthur's mind wasn't clear, but among the people Crom could encounter in this town, Arthur was definitely the worst so far. But the problem was how to deal with him. He couldn't kill him. So, when Arthur attacked again, Crom deliberately stepped aside, blocking the blow while quickly turning the hilt of his sword, then striking Arthur's throat with force. The feeling of suffocation came immediately. Arthur went limp and knelt on the ground. After all, Crom's current level was double his. Killing him would be as easy as flipping his hand. But Arthur didn't deserve to die. Crom only hoped to calm him down. However, in the end, he still thought things were too simple. Arthur was too obsessed with the past. On the one hand, he believed that the dead couldn't appear before him. On the other hand, he didn't want to admit being defeated by someone he considered trash. So, whatever the reason, he couldn't collapse here. Flames erupted on his blade. Even if you can block my sword, you can't block my fire, he roared, charging towards Crom again. But no matter how hard he tried, he was no longer Crom's match. Crom, who was crouching, simply extended his ankle, and Arthur tripped and fell to the ground. He couldn't even hold onto the sword in his hand, which flew out, while Arthur crawled towards his weapon. Crom kept explaining, saying that he was really human and didn't want revenge. Unexpectedly, Arthur suddenly turned back and angrily accused him. Stop lying. You just want to trick me and then eat me. At this point, Crom finally understood completely. He couldn't convince Arthur at all, because this guy was out of his mind. In that case, Crom had to use his skill. At the same time, a large crack suddenly appeared in the south of the town. Although all the border soldiers raised their weapons, it was clear that they were terrified. It turned out that a large number of terrifying monsters had appeared in the town. The loud roars also attracted Crom's attention. He keenly recognized the roars as those of monsters. The same sound, the same location, made him recall the scene from 10 years ago, because his parents had died on that day. The danger threatening his hometown seemed to make Arthur a little more, but in his perception, there had been no unusual phenomena in the nearby dungeons recently. At this moment, Arthur suddenly seemed to be struck by something, and he thought of a terrifying truth. It must be this demon Crom who brought those monsters in. I'm sure of it. Crom was about to go crazy because of him. How much nonsense did he have to say before he stopped? This also meant that Crom couldn't delay any longer. He had to erase Arthur's memory quickly. However, just as he was about to act, a figure suddenly rushed in here, causing Crom to hastily stop. Fortunately, the other party didn't notice them, just focused on running. However, Arthur suddenly reached out and stopped the girl. Unable to defeat Crom, he hurriedly asked the girl for help, because judging from her attire, she was probably also an adventurer. But the girl didn't want to pay attention to him, saying that she had a mission to complete. Unexpectedly, this guy still wouldn't let it go, and even blamed Crom for the monsters invading the town. Crom naturally denied it, because he hadn't done it, and the girl naturally didn't believe him, because she was the one who did it. But this made the idiot Arthur anxious, his face pale as he kept explaining to the girl. Gradually, Crom finally noticed something strange. Because that girl gave him a sense of unease, he found his inner self urged, pulled towards the girl. This feeling was very bad, and he immediately shouted at Arthur to get away from that girl. Unfortunately, it was too late. Just as Arthur turned his head, a giant sickle pierced through his back. He looked down on the weak, pushing them into a demon's den. Unexpectedly, the young man got lucky and became a monster hero. Now the hero returned, kindly not dwelling on the past. He was kicked while he was down, falsely accused. Not only was he slandered for wanting to assault someone on the street, but he was also blamed for the monsters entering the city. But retribution was swift. Who spared whom? Just as Arthur lost and asked a passing girl for help, the evil sickle punished this fool. The girl really couldn't stand this annoying guy. No! Because those monsters were clearly released by me. A sinister smile flashed across her beautiful face, sending chills down one's spine. At this moment, Arthur was trembling in pain, but he still didn't seem to understand what was happening. Usually, when the mastermind reveals themselves, it means you're about to die. Only this time, Crom stopped it. This puzzled the girl. Hadn't they just been fighting? That's right, but it doesn't mean I can let you kill someone. Crom stared at the girl in front of him with a firm gaze. He knew this girl definitely had information related to the monsters. So, he had to defeat her quickly and rush to the south of the city to provide support. But the girl clearly didn't take him seriously. He was just a fool with blind courage. If she didn't have a mission, to deliver blood to the town center, she would be happy to enjoy the feeling of slowly tearing him apart. So, regarding quickly ending the fight, the two unexpectedly reached an agreement. The battle began. The first to strike was the perverted girl who liked licking the blood on her blade, and the one who took the hit was the most popular monster hero. As for the only spectator at the scene, Arthur, he looked very confused at the moment. He still didn't understand why Crom pretended to protect him. As a former bully, he believed that the Crom of the past was dead. Otherwise, he couldn't have escaped from that demonic place. Previously, he had indeed heard that corpses absorbing dark magic could turn into monsters. But he also heard that these monsters would forget all the grudges they held in life. At first, he thought it was just nonsense, but now it seemed. Could it be that Crom really hadn't come back to kill him? It was just that Crom wasn't free to pay attention to this idiot right now. The girl's power put unprecedented pressure on him. That giant weapon didn't even give him a chance to get close. She was as strong as Garrett of the Evil Dragon Society. No, perhaps even stronger. Crom could sense that this girl was at least level 50. In other words, she had reached the limit of an ordinary adventurer. The next step was to be recruited as a knight. Crom could hardly imagine encountering such a strong opponent in a small town like this. The continuous attacks made him almost breathless. But fortunately, the girl finally revealed an opening. Seizing the opportunity, Crom immediately rushed forward, and a horizontal slash finally hit her. However, he still didn't dare to be careless. He knew the girl couldn't be defeated so easily. The truth was exactly as he expected. The girl didn't feel any pain at all. On the contrary, she showed admiration for Crom. This was beyond Crom's expectation. Although the wound was shallow, it shouldn't have been ineffective against her. Until a golden light appeared on the girl's palm, and the wound on her abdomen healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Crom realized the situation was much more serious than he imagined. In a scenario where both sides had healing skills, once dragged into this protracted war of attrition, the town's casualties would only become more severe. At the same time, the girl, who had originally intended to leave, now became belligerent, stimulated by the pain. And even worse, under Arthur's watchful eye, Crom couldn't use his true form to fight. Therefore, using illusions to intimidate his opponent became his only hope. It was just that the girl's fearless appearance invisibly created great difficulty for this trick. So, Crom could only channel magic power into his blade, then look for an opportunity to touch her in an instant, exploiting the deepest fear in the girl's heart. However, the girl wasn't completely carefree as she appeared. The never-before-seen move instinctively raised her guard. Therefore, in dealing with Crom's next attack, her defense was almost perfect, giving Crom no chance to touch her. Unconscious worry was evident on his face. The perceptive girl noticed this, and mocked him cruelly. "It seems your skill consumes a lot of magic power. Can you still hold on?" Crom didn't answer, but his slight trembling completely confirmed the girl's guess. Sure enough, when Crom attacked again, he was completely unable to withstand the girl's counterattack. Not only did he not make any progress, but the sword in his hand also flew out. The girl triumphantly mocked the person she had seen through, but she didn't expect that all of this was calculated by Crom. By the time she realized it, it was too late. A bizarre, withered hand had appeared before her. Crom skillfully used their bodies to block Arthur's view, and then comfortably transformed his claws, stabbing them hard into the girl's chest. The Soul Reader was finally successfully activated. The girl's weakest side was finally exposed. But what Crom didn't expect was that this time, he seemed to have failed. Because in the girl's spiritual world, there was nothing but emptiness. Crom still clearly remembered that deep within Garrett's memories was a ruined city, and the memories of some monsters were of dungeons and vast fields. But this was the first time he had encountered this blank space. Initially, he wanted to take this opportunity to learn everything about the girl. But now it seemed that this was clearly impossible. Until a little girl's back suddenly caught his eye. Crom finally seemed to find a breakthrough. The little girl looked very sad, muttering incessantly, "Heal, heal." It sounded like the results weren't satisfactory, so Crom curiously wanted to go and have a look. But the scene before him sent shivers down his spine. On the ground were piles of blood-stained tools, along with the torn corpses of rats. And what the little girl really wanted to revive was a rat that had been transformed into a two-headed creature. The little girl cut the rat into 80 pieces, and then sewed the two heads together. The horrifying scene amused the watching man, but the little girl turning around startled him. It turned out that the man was stealing the little girl's memory fragments. The dream world shouldn't have interacted with him, but for some reason the little girl seemed to see him, turning her head and staring at him. Crom suddenly felt a splitting headache in reality, collapsing and remaining on the ground for a long time, unable to compose herself. She couldn't comprehend what this girl had been through. The girl's heart, besides a childlike, innocent cruelty, seemed devoid of any other emotion. At this moment, the girl seemed to sense something amiss. Though unaware of what the man had done, she was wary of any threat. Crom inwardly cursed. Despite quickly retrieving her sword, she paid the price for her distraction. The sharp side sliced into her without hesitation. The force even sent her flying. Under the dual blow to both mind and body, Crom was momentarily stunned. Is this the end? The girl looked at the fallen Crom with a sneer. Crom, finally getting up, realized her prized illusions were useless against the girl. Now, the only effective way was to drop her disguise and restore her monster strength to defeat her. But if Arthur saw, he'd surely cause a commotion, alerting the whole town and causing widespread panic. During this critical time of monster invasion, such chaos would be a fatal blow. But continuing like this would only repeat the tragedy of the past. Caught in a dilemma, Crom was truly at a loss. Equally troubled was Arthur. Despite his lack of strength, it was clear the witch had the upper hand. He was still unsure whether Crom had come to kill him. But he had realized one thing. After the powerful witch killed Crom, he wouldn't escape death either. Thus, a rare brilliant idea sparked in his mind. Arthur took out his only magic stone, and poured all his meager fire magic into it. Just as the witch focused all her power on attacking Crom, he successfully threw it. Luckily it hit the witch, but unfortunately, the attack was ineffective. On the contrary, it angered the witch. Towards this impolite person, the girl decided to deal with him first. So, the unlucky Arthur received another slash. Crom was surprised. She hadn't expected Arthur to help her. But clearly, his life was in danger. In this critical moment, a blue flash accompanied by the clang of metal caught the girl's eye. When her vision cleared, she discovered a bizarre monster had blocked her scythe. The girl's first reaction wasn't fear, but suspicion. Because she was certain she hadn't lured this monster. Where did it come from? Could it be him? The girl's guess was bold and accurate. But now, she needed to focus on the battle. With her monstrous strength surging, Crom was much stronger, easily breaking the girl's defenses. And before the girl could escape her attack range, retaliated, wounding her. The girl reacted, leaping back several times to disengage. Most importantly, the opponent was clearly self-aware. Normally, monsters were violent and chaotic, but she wasn't controlled by the abyss's hatred and desires. It was hard not to be amazed by such a mysterious being. The girl even felt that even that great one hadn't foreseen this. However, this wouldn't affect her next plan. The girl gripped her weapon tightly, as an incomprehensible incantation echoed from her lips. A magic circle brimming with energy suddenly appeared beneath her feet. It was the girl's strongest forbidden spell, Undying Devil. This spell shortened the user's lifespan to accelerate energy circulation within the body, instantly healing all wounds, and comprehensively enhancing all attributes. The girl hadn't expected to be forced to use her full power, but undoubtedly, the next battle would be no game. The monster attacked first. As soon as the words left her mouth, the sharp blade pierced Crom's arm precisely, but that was all. Before the girl could gloat, the side's tip was stuck in the flesh, unable to penetrate further. That was because Crom's other hand gripped the blade. This was Crom's familiar tactic, and it proved effective once again. The restrained girl didn't even have time to react before Crom's third hand injured her eye. However, the perverse girl wasn't discouraged. Instead, the intense pain excited her. Even losing her weapon didn't matter. Her immortality allowed her to wear down her opponent endlessly. As she spoke, her bisected eyeball began moving strangely, regenerating in mere moments. But at that instant, the giant sides suddenly flew towards her. The girl couldn't believe it. She thought the monster had struggled to seize her weapon. She couldn't understand why it was returned. The girl simply didn't grasp that Crom's current power far exceeded her imagination. Crom could defeat her any way she chose. So, she truly didn't care about the weapon. As for what followed, no matter how miraculous the girl's life force, Crom would crush it bit by bit. The rat, the girl's only companion, was chopped into 80 pieces by her, simply because the girl was perverse. The brutal slaughter only excited her more. Even if she was the one injured, it was no exception. The monster warrior's fists rained down on her body. But the girl felt no pain, only extreme excitement. After all, it had been a long time since anyone forced her to use her ultimate move. Moreover, against a creature never seen before. She couldn't believe a monster wasn't controlled by instincts. It even risked itself protecting a human, even though that human had attacked her. The monster's behavior was truly baffling, but it only drove the girl into greater frenzy. Crom ignored the girl's rambling from beginning to end, but her attacks never ceased. She didn't believe the opponent's life force was truly infinite, until another punch landed on the girl's chin, the clear snap of breaking neck bones echoing. But relying on her regenerative magic, the girl's demeanor remained as arrogant as ever. Her left hand massaged her newly healed neck, her mouth mocking the monster's stupidity. But in the next moment, a dark shadow flashed past her eyes, and the girl's left hand flew off. However, it was more than that, because it was her entire body that was severed. As she felt the surprised pain in her abdomen, her upper body began to drift away. No matter how powerful her healing magic, it would be difficult to regenerate before retrieving her lower half. The girl's life was rapidly fading. She clearly wouldn't last much longer. So, Crom turned to attend to Arthur. But just as she lifted her foot to leave, the girl, using her remaining arm, leaped onto Crom's shoulder, towards the one who dared ignore her. She would drag him to hell with her, even in death. As she spoke, she opened her mouth, aiming to deliver a fatal blow to Crom. However, against such a vast difference in strength, it was futile. Crom grabbed the girl's neck and slammed her to the ground. Now, the girl was barely clinging to life. Sensing her imminent demise, she wasn't sorrowful, but instead began to pity the monster before her. If only you could abandon reason. Actually, living as a monster is quite good. No matter how much you try to please humans, you can never gain their love. The girl, pulled up, looked at the monster with amusement. Until now, she had never yielded. But she didn't know Crom never desired to be a celebrated hero. She only wanted to alleviate people's suffering as much as possible in these chaotic times. Even if it was just a little. That was all she hoped for. The battle between the monster and the perverse girl finally ended. Next, she just needed to deal with Arthur. Seeing the approaching monster, Arthur panicked. Although it seemed he'd guessed everything correctly, he couldn't bring himself to be happy this time. As the monster's claws touched his head, Arthur felt his soul drain, his body paralyzed. Darkness enveloped him. When he awoke, he wasn't in the familiar town. Instead, countless bizarre eyeballs stared at him. Arthur wanted to scream but couldn't make a sound. Finally, he fainted from sheer terror. It was actually an illusion Crom created to frighten him. At least in the current situation, modifying his memories was slightly easier. The dark circles under Arthur's eyes reappeared before her. It seemed his life hadn't been easy, but whether out of fear or guilt, for his actions, this was immediate retribution. Crom had considered leaving his memories untouched. After all, any memory was precious. Moreover, in his current mental state, even if he claimed to have encountered a monster, no one would believe him. However, considering Arthur might cause trouble for Camille, she had to do this. At this point, one might wonder why Crom didn't kill Arthur outright. His attitude towards Camille was truly despicable, difficult to accept. It was because only Crom knew. This weak man was once a good person. At least he had been to her. As her soul-piercing hand probed Arthur's mind, a long-buried memory surfaced. The story began with the first encounter of three teenagers. The red-haired teen greeted the black-clad teen passing by. Red Hair knew everything about the other boy. He knew the black-clad teen had a one-time revival skill. This meant he had no combat ability and couldn't level up. It was also the main reason other teams didn't want him. And even for menial tasks, there were those more suitable than the black-clad teen. Despite this, Red Hair invited him, promising not to ask anything unreasonable, because he'd heard the black-clad teen dreamed of being an adventurer. So, if you're going to adventure, then come with us. The hooded teen also stepped forward, echoing the sentiment. From him, the black-clad teen learned that Red Hair had also lost his parents at a young age, his father killed by monsters. However, the story changed here. The black-clad teen, who should have accepted, refused. He decided to give up on becoming an adventurer. The red-haired teen wasn't angry but approved of his choice. But thank you for the offer. Goodbye. As Arthur was about to leave, Red Hair suddenly stopped him. He was surprised the black-clad teen knew his name. But before he could ask, the image was interrupted by Arthur waking up. Now Crom was trying to drag him to the bustling marketplace. Finally, after spotting a passerby, she entrusted Arthur to him. Arthur awoke, looking at the stranger with confusion. From him, he learned he'd been attacked by a strange woman. Arthur had a headache, his memory hazy, but it seemed like something had happened. It seems you saved me. I've never met you before. Are you an adventurer too? Crom was satisfied with Arthur's reaction, as it proved she'd successfully erased all his related memories. She believed he'd sleep well from now on. But at this moment, Arthur's pupils suddenly constricted, and he involuntarily knelt before Crom. The unexpected scene confused both of them. They didn't understand why he did this. Even Arthur didn't know, only feeling a powerful urge to apologize to the man who saved him. However, Crom quickly understood. It was Arthur's remorse. With his fear gone along with his memories, his overwhelming guilt surfaced. Although Arthur was still confused, Crom couldn't linger any longer, because the battle with the monsters in the south was imminent. So, goodbye, Arthur. Seeing the guards sowing chaos in the town, anyone could have killed him. But faced with the mission entrusted by his master, he was an indomitable warrior. Even cut in half, he fought to the end. While he, for his own life, betrayed his comrades. Even daily torment by guilt couldn't hide his sin. But it must be admitted, he was once a light in someone's life. Although crime should be punished, Crom felt life also deserved a chance at redemption. Only, all of this no longer concerned him. Because from today, they were all passers-by in his life. More worthy of his redemption now was this town under attack by monsters. Although the three-eyed white wolves weren't high level, their sheer numbers were overwhelming. This made the already weak soldiers. At this point, even the will to fight was completely gone. The human side quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. All they could do was evacuate the women and children as soon as possible. However, when a roar rang in his ears, the man truly realized the gravity of the situation. Because it was clearly the dungeon lord, whose appearance meant the dungeon was no longer a safe haven. Because there was no longer endless dark magic there. Instead, the monsters would follow the dungeon lord, this source of magic, and invade human settlements together. So, before more monsters arrived, they needed to eliminate this black wolf as soon as possible. But the problem was, what could an ordinary person like him rely on? Just looking at the eyes covering the monster's body was enough to make one terrified. The man knew he was no match for these monsters. But for his homeland, he still chose to face everything that could tear him apart. And at this moment, a young man stepped forward. "Sir, can you step back?" The man saw the young man's intention, but even though he couldn't handle it himself, he still didn't forget to advise the young man. No matter who you are, you can't deal with so many monsters alone. However, actual actions would prove everything to Crom. As he spoke, two three-eyed white wolves lunged forward, and Crom just gently swung the sword in his hand, and they turned into two corpses lying on the ground. Experience was still scarce as always, but the surprise was not small. The man stared in disbelief. It made him guess the true identity of this brave young man. At this time, they were surrounded by more monsters. But somehow, the man felt no fear in his heart. The previous scene repeated itself. The only difference was that there were more monster corpses on the ground. Dealing with these small monsters didn't take Crom much effort. Although there was a small incident in the middle, it couldn't significantly affect Crom. Crom spun, the hilt of his sword hitting the white wolf's head hard, followed by a slash that finished the wolf off. Now, with the magic supply from Soul Eater, Crom could use regeneration without restraint. The mutual support of both meant no matter how many monsters came, he could eliminate them all. In addition, the levels of these small wolves weren't high, so Crom didn't even need to reveal his monster form. The brave young man's strength was witnessed by everyone, and hope was rekindled in the villagers' eyes. With the participation of this powerful adventurer, they believed the town would soon be out of danger. Only one person suddenly stopped. It was Arthur's teammate, the hooded man. He was stunned by the hero's appearance. She looks a lot like Crom. Is Crom still alive? But the hooded man quickly dismissed his thought. Because Crom didn't have white hair. Nor did he have such power. More importantly, he never had such a cold, stern expression. The brief victory made these people lose their vigilance, unaware that a greater danger was quietly approaching. Along with a loud crash, a dark shadow slowly emerged from the fog. The body covered in eyes was the dungeon lord, Fenrir. Witnessing the corpses of his kind scattered everywhere, Fenrir flew into a rage. Just a flick of his tail was enough to create terrible destruction. Everyone was once again extremely tense, but they were still determined to fight to the death. Only Crom still said that sentence, "Can everyone step back?" The aura Fenrir exuded was indeed terrifying, but in front of Crom, it was insignificant. After all, Fenrir was only level 46. Not as scary as Garrett or the Titan's magic source. Crom just gently raised his hand and slashed, successfully creating a wound on his body. Fenrir instinctively took 2 steps back in pain. He didn't know why, but this human in front of him always made him tremble from the bottom of his heart. The subsequent truth proved his intuition to be completely correct. After several rounds of fighting, Fenrir not only failed to advance, but also made himself tired and panting. On the contrary, Crom, with Soul Eater in one hand and regeneration in the other, fought for so long but his state remained as full as it was at the beginning. Not to mention Crom's level was much higher. At this point, Fenrir finally realized the anomaly. Even the endurance he was most proud of was useless. Continuing to fight was meaningless. He immediately turned and ran. However, he seemed to have forgotten that this was human territory. Although the villagers couldn't defeat him, finding a way to hold him back wasn't a big problem. The prepared chains constantly wrapped around the monster's body. Fenrir was quickly tied up. But at the same time, the surrounding environment suddenly changed. In the darkness, Fenrir tried to scream, but it seemed to have no effect. On the contrary, a monster that even he feared had appeared at some point. Fenrir was so scared that he peed his pants, and while he was struggling, he suddenly found that everything had returned to normal, except that there was another wound on his neck. Then, Fenrir couldn't hold on any longer and fell to the ground. 800 monsters attacked the town at night. No one could resist them, all could only obediently wait for death. Only the man stood up and successfully killed the lord. But people couldn't have imagined that. The hero in their eyes at this moment was the waste teenager that no one wanted to accept before. With the fall of Lord Fenrir, this dungeon disaster was completely extinguished. But Crom wasn't happy at all. Because in the series of unexpected events tonight, there were still many things that couldn't be explained. For example, why did that girl lead the monsters into town? Since Crom didn't have time to interrogate her at the time, he didn't know the specific reason behind this. But it was certain that relevant clues could be found on her. Only before going back. She probably had to deal with these burning gazes first. Crom, shining brightly, had clearly become the focus of everyone at this moment. So, she could only remind everyone that there might still be other monsters in the town to divert everyone's attention. Of course, this wasn't entirely unreasonable. Now really wasn't the time to be negligent. So, the unanimously agreed opinion was quickly implemented. This gave Crom the opportunity to escape everyone's gaze. However, accidentally passing each other made the hooded man fall into deep thought. Because she really looked like Crom. Except for expression and temperament, the two were almost identical. But whether this was true or not, there was one thing she was sure of. And that was absolutely not to tell Arthur about today's events. Because in his current mental state, he clearly couldn't bear any more shocks. Not long after, Crom returned to the previous battlefield. At this moment, there was nothing here but body fragments. However, Crom still had to carefully examine the woman's body. After all, no one knew if she could be resurrected. Besides why the girl brought the monsters here, Crom actually still had another question. That was the feeling of being inexplicably drawn in when they first met. It was a disgusting feeling from the bottom of his heart. In short, it felt very bad. Even when facing her corpse now, this feeling was still there. Until Crom lifted the girl's cloak. The reason behind it also appeared. It was a pearl emitting a faint light, and there seemed to be a little liquid flowing inside. Obviously, the thing that made people uncomfortable was this pearl. But whether it was what she used to lure monsters into the city was still unknown. But one thing Crom could be sure of was that this unlucky thing absolutely couldn't stay in town. The noise of the town lasted until dawn before gradually quieting down. At this time, the streets were littered with injured people. Among them, a panicked girl ran out of the crowd, seemingly looking for something. Only the result didn't seem to be as expected, until a lively discussion rang in her ears. The main topic was a young man with white hair. If he hadn't appeared, Rockdat would have been reduced to rubble. For some reason, the girl's heart suddenly calmed down. Today's scene seemed to have been promised to her by someone. So that she wouldn't cry, he said he would protect her, and protect the whole town. She couldn't believe he actually did it. At this point, she was no longer worried about him, because the girl knew her brother was able to protect himself. So, after you're done with everything, come home quickly. A few days later, in the capital city of Rayburg, the captains meeting in the conference room all looked unhappy. One of them even slammed the table and stood up, shouting angrily because all the guards in the Rockdat watchtower were dead. This was clearly caused by humans, right? But someone also said not to get too excited. This could also be a rumor. After all, every time monsters invaded, there were always all kinds of rumors. Immediately someone objected and mentioned the focus of this meeting, Devon's Claw. Their worry actually stemmed from the lack of any information about the Red One. After all, Judgment Day was approaching, but they didn't even know where the Red One was. Looking at this noisy group of arguing people, Ireland was disdainful. But Mira beside him was lost in thought, because this was the first time she had heard the term Judgment Day. After the meeting ended, Ireland in the hallway finally couldn't help but complain about these screaming monkeys. And Mira immediately asked the question in her heart. She didn't understand why the other captains were so worried. She only knew that the Red One everyone mentioned was a person with a red birthmark on his face, and he was likely related to this monster attack. Only, people had never officially searched for him, and they weren't even sure if the Red One actually existed. But Mira believed the captain definitely knew more details. Too much guessing will shorten your lifespan. Ireland mercilessly lectured this little girl. However, for this most trusted subordinate, he finally decided to let her participate. I think you should know, more than 100 years ago, a lord in the countryside used some evil methods to control monsters, and led them to attack the capital. And the mastermind behind that lord was Viscount Ilos at the time, a man with red hair and a red birthmark. Mira immediately showed an incredulous expression. Could it be that he is the Red One? But wasn't that more than 100 years ago? Ireland continued without paying attention. 300 years ago, a court mage was executed for cursing the entire town. We don't know if this really happened, nor do we know the mage's specific name. But it is said that his hair was as red as fire, and there were severe scars on his face. Hearing this, Mira was speechless with astonishment. But the even more shocking thing was still to come. 1,000 years ago, there was a god who blessed mankind. And thanks to this god, humans no longer had to fear monsters. But according to records in the scripture, the impact of this blessing was so great that it broke the balance of the world. So, as a price, disasters would befall the earth for 7 days. From earthquakes to floods and tornadoes, as well as fire winds and hordes of monsters. Until the last day, a monster redder than the red swamp crawled out from it. Mira was completely stunned. Don't tell me this is the Red One everyone is worried about. Although Ireland didn't want to believe it either, he had to admit that many elders of the gods thought so. And anyway, monster attacks are increasing. If this continues, humanity will definitely not be able to withstand it. So, finding the Red One and solving this problem has become the country's top priority. At the same time, elsewhere, news of Rockdat being attacked was being praised. Mez didn't expect Ash to actually do it. Although news from the spies indicated that the chaos was quickly quelled, it was enough to prove Ash's ability. Overjoyed, Mez immediately said that the previously promised research funding would soon be dispersed. Only, he didn't understand why Ash didn't seem happy. Until Ash slammed his fist on the table, the anger accumulated in his heart could no longer be contained. For him, causing a dungeon disaster wasn't difficult. He also didn't care about having a few monsters killed by others. But what he couldn't understand was who had such great power. After all, the leader this time was Garrett, and he absolutely couldn't betray him. Not to mention he held the ultimate white magic immortality. Could there really be someone so strong that they could deal with Fenrir and kill Garrett at the same time? The only people he could think of were the Night Corps, but he quickly dismissed this thought, because this meant that the crystal containing his blood would also fall into their hands. He didn't believe that the national leaders of this era were capable of doing that, Otherwise they would have come to arrest him by now. Then there's only one answer left. And that is that someone who transcends the rules has appeared. A vestige of the god who cursed this world.